Go ahead, Peter, plug in and give that a shot. Yeah, go ahead. Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Test 1 2. That's good.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to day 2 of the special budget meeting, May 24th, 2022. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. McAllister?
Here.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gebhardt? Mr. Howe?
Here.
Mr. Lattiser? Mr. McElroy? Mr. Ricks?
Here.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis? 9 present.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. This evening, Mayor Picozzi is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Mayor?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the balls bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Good evening, everyone. At this time, I'm going to look for a motion to reopen the public hearing on all unfinished items and departments. Councilman Howe.
Motion to reopen hearings on all unfinished business and departments.
Second by Councilman Foley. Councilman Gephardt. Roll call? We'll do a roll call vote. A yes vote is to reopen the public hearing.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gebhardt? Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis? 9 yes to open the public hearing.
Thank you very much. Okay, if you are following at home, we are now on Public Works. Public Works will be the first department to come before us this evening. Their budget can be found on page 43. Good evening, Director. Yeah, that's you.
Good evening.
And I apologize, we're, DPW is a number of different ones, so we're going to start off with Public Works Administration. So that can be found on page 42, Public Works Administration. My first question for you, Director, is how are you for staffing overall in DPW?
We're in pretty good shape. We have a handful of vacancies. Heavy equipment mechanic, custodian. There's an HVAC position, but that's not going to be filled. Christie's working on it. Oh. These are vacancies.
Thank you. Yes, that's one I need just to do.
So we have 2 vacancies in highway, 3 vacancies in sanitation, 1 vacancy in automotive, 3 vacancies in building maintenance, and 1 vacancy in Thayer McDermott. All right. One thing that should be noted is that there's currently a vacancy in highway that's listed as a supervisor. The supervisor highway, that position should have been removed. We filled a supervisor position in sanitation, and we used that position. So there were 2 positions in highway for supervisor. We took one of those positions and moved it over to be a supervisor in sanitation. So when this budget came out, it kept both of those supervisor and highway positions. One of those should be eliminated. It's not necessary.
Okay, and we'll have you point that out when we get to the specific highway and the sanitation budget. Are there any questions from members of the council on the Public Works Administration budget on page 42? Councilman Lattiser.
Thank you. Director, what is the rent item, 62,310 for 200,000?
That's for the Sawtooth building.
I'm sorry, 20,000. No, it's 200,000. Well, actually, the number is very difficult to read. In the 2022 budget, it says 200,000. Then in the 2023 budget, it says 520,000. So I guess now my question is, what is it and what number is it?
The 200,000 for the 2022 budget, that was for a partial year. That was anticipating that we were going to be in the Sawtooth building before the end of this fiscal year. The 500, what is it? 520, that's the rent for the Sawtooth building moving forward.
Okay.
It's not, yeah.
I can't hear you, Mayor.
Right, so the 520,000, that's a partial rent because we're not going to be in there July 1st, right?
Okay, so it's a prorated number of rent
Correct.
for the Sawtooth building. Okay, and what was the $200,000 rent for?
They had anticipated that we might be in the Sawtooth building this fiscal year.
I see. Okay, thank you. That's all I got.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other questions for members of the council on the Public Works Administration budget? Any questions from members of the public on the Public Works Administration budget found on page 42? Any questions for members of the public on the Public Works Administration budget? Okay, hearing none, we will move to the Public Works Highway budget. Public Works Highway budget is on page 43. Any questions from members of the council on the Public Works Highway budget? Councilman Ricks.
I'm looking at line item 63,290 asphalt. And I see that the 2022 fiscal year projection is that $200,000 will be spent out of that line item, and that for the fiscal year 23 budget, it is also $200,000. I understand that a lot of the ARPA funds have gone into paving, so I wanted to get some information on that.
Excuse me. None of that money would be represented in this line item. This line item is just for asphalt. The ARPA money would not be part of this line item.
Mm-hmm.
In that case, I'm a little bit confused because for the 22 year to date, In that column, I'm seeing negative $1,291,000. So
That, what you're seeing there is that number represents a credit to the city because that's the reimbursement that we receive from National Grid. So when National Grid cuts into a roadway, we go out and we repave it. Then we pay the contractor, and then National Grid reimburses us. When National Grid reimburses us, it goes back into this line item. That's why it's showing up in the way it is.
thank you. That's helpful. I guess my follow-up question is that we don't expect the ARPA funds to continue into fiscal year 24. So would it be accurate to say that if we wanted to increase the line item out?
Councilman, not to interrupt you, but the ARPA funds being used for paving is in the capital budget. It's, I believe it was $1.8 million. Page 3 of the I know we're not there yet, but just to point you in the right direction.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that. And let's see, just as I'm, okay, I see capital to be presented between the pensions and the sewer. Thank you. I'll save the questions for then.
Thank you, Councilman. Any questions? Councilwoman Travis.
I didn't hear you at the beginning.
Highway, we have, I'm sorry, Highway, we have 2 vacancies, but one of them is,
We sold two.
so we actually
We
have
don't count
3.
that one.
All right. So yeah, we have 3 vacancies by the books right now, but one of them is supervisor highway, but that supervisor position is going to be eliminated. So the other 2 positions are an operations person, which essentially functions as kind of dispatch, and then a senior laborer. Those are the 2 current vacancies we're looking to fill.
Thank you. Eric, where on the supervisor highway position, you have 2 posted here in the budget. You're saying one's going to be eliminated?
Yeah, there's the other supervisor highway position hasn't been filled for quite some time.
Okay. So we need to change that in this budget document, right? We got to change it from 2 to 1. And then I'm going to assume that 166,596 gets cut in half.
Probably not in half, but that's the ballpark.
What would be the number? Because we got to have the exact number.
It's going to take out 70,975.
Taking out?
Yeah, that's the savings. That's the position.
All right, so you got a calculator over there to do that math real quick so we can make the change?
I don't.
All right, hold on. I'll take it on my phone. $166,596 less how much?
70,975.
So that line's going to change to 95,621, which will change. Well, where will that 70 go, though? That's going to be redirected, right? Because you're putting another position somewhere else.
Yeah, that's already in there.
Councilman, I'm actually not inclined to take that out of the budget yet because we're not convinced we can go with 1. It wasn't filled because of the layoffs. We have 1 supervisor, very capable man, but we're just kind of gauging it. We haven't filled it because I don't like to fill positions, you know that. But I'm not convinced that we don't need that supervisor. I'd like to get through the summer and see how it's working out. I won't fill it unless absolutely necessary. I've resisted it so far, but by the time we got all the laid off workers back last year, we were close to fall anyway.
So we're going to leave it with 2 positions. 1 is going to currently be filled, 1 is open.
It's open and it won't be filled unless we absolutely have to. But we're, like I said, Rich Cole, he's very, very capable, but I'm a little afraid to just eliminate it from now. We have a bigger workforce than we have in a couple of years. So,
Okay.
we want to make sure things are running smoothly.
No, I agree. I wasn't aware of it until Eric just mentioned that you was cutting one position. I had no idea.
Yeah.
But that's fine. You
I
wanna
should
leave
have
it in.
explained that better. Like I said, just in an abundance of caution, I'd like to leave that position there.
I'm fine with that.
Sometimes councilmen get testy if things don't get done. I have all the confidence in the world in Rich. I think he can do it alone, but Eric and I have discussed it. We're just, just in case, because there are a lot of, a lot of things. It's a big city.
Well, and we also know their back's been up against the wall for the last couple of years, too. I'm fine with that. So in your salary item, Eric, 63,101, you are projected for 2,227,000, and the proposed is 2,967,000. Is that increase strictly because of contractual obligations and longevity, step increases, whatever that complicated formula is they use, or does that also include some new bodies?
It certainly is those things, but it also takes into account that we've brought back a lot of people that had previously been laid off. When we started this fiscal year, Highway probably had 12 or 14 vacancies, right? And so now we're looking at 3. So when those, obviously last year's budget incorporated those positions, so that's why, that's kind of the discrepancy.
Yeah, I agree with that. Makes sense. Something I've seen throughout this, particularly on tonight's agenda, is the electricity item, 63,224. And it's in numerous departments with a relatively significant increase in the bid. I've checked into it with the grid, and I know we don't buy our electricity from the grid. I believe you buy it through a third-party vendor or something or other. The grid, they have not had an increase in their electrical rates, so I'm told. So why is this increase, which is, I don't know, somewhere around 40% in the electric item? And it's not just your department, it's other departments have really hit that line item hard. Can't hear you.
We've been dealing with the league vendor. They give us price updates. Our contract runs till the end of December. And I plan to bring, and I've talked to the council president and just recently, the chairman of the finance, we plan to bring you, if market conditions are right, an extension of that contract in the second meeting of the June council. And the prices here are reflecting what they're telling us the prices will be for a 3-year contract as of a month ago.
For how many year contract?
Well, they'll give us an opportunity to do 1, 2, or 3 years, and that option will be before the council.
Okay, but right now we're
Probably
budgeting for
be a
1 year.
recommendation for 3 years.
Right now, we're budgeting for 1 year, not 3 years. We're budgeting for 1 year. So what you're saying is you're anticipating an increase in our cost of purchasing electricity to occur somewheres in December, basically halfway through the year. And you're budgeting that now.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, looking at some of the other electricity categories, it's more complicated because of the street lighting conversion, but for,
Okay, fair enough. Bear with me 1 second, Eric. So never mind, I was looking at it in reverse. I was going to ask you why one of the positions that you have, the salary was actually reduced, but I was looking at it backwards. That's it. I'm good with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other questions from members of the council on the Public Works Highway? I don't want to point fingers, but. Any questions from members of the public on the Public Works Highway budget, page 43?
Philip Durclow, Ward 4. Just a general question. When the equipment is broken down on these positions you have in the highway department, like the power sweepers, the clamshell operator, what do you do with those people? What do you send them home? Do you lay them off? Do you have another contingency plan that you have it put in place that these people can work on?
Yeah.
They're still getting paid.
I'm sorry?
They're still getting paid.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. The highway department keeps pretty busy. There's always something. You know, they're the ones that are out, you know, picking up yard waste. You know, those are the ones that are out filling potholes, repairing catch basins, you know, mowing the areas that, like the pocket parks and areas like that. So there's always something for them to do, and there's always rainy day activities as well. You know, they'll come in, they'll maintain their equipment on rainy days, and so yeah, they're always busy.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions from members of the public on the Public Works Highway budget? Okay. Next up is Public Works Recycling and Sanitation. Director, first of all, I just want to acknowledge and thank all the people in this department. It's been a tough year. They do an excellent work. Picking up recycling, picking up trash, all hours, working split shifts, overtime, and I know that the residents of Warwick really appreciate that, and I just want to make mention of that. The other thing I want to point out here is an item that we talk about at every budget hearing. It's one of those unfunded mandates that Councilman Howe likes to bring up. I'm probably stealing his question, but the tipping fees. Every year, this seems to go up and up and up and up. And we see it here again in the proposed budget. This is up in Johnson. This is the state that has nothing to do with the city. But can you just talk about that, how these tipping fees are set at the state level and the municipalities just get the bill?
Yeah, like you said, that's something that we can't really control. They'll typically send something out to the municipality saying, hey, this is our plan. Municipalities will push back. And this year, so there are two numbers, right? Every municipality has a cap. If you stay under that cap as far as trash goes, we were paying $47 a ton. That new under cap rate is 54. Very few municipalities actually manage to stay under their cap. So once you go over your cap, that number goes up considerably. It's 90 now. Right, and it's going up to 100. So again, obviously that's a pretty significant change. And so that's why obviously that's why it's reflected in the budget. But again, that's why we ask people to recycle. We try and promote that. And Warwick has typically had a very high recycling rate, among the best in the state. But again, every piece of recycling that goes up there is disposed of for free. Every piece of trash that goes up there, we're paying per ton. So that's why it's important to kind of keep motivating people and keep getting that message out there. And that's actually one of the initiatives that we're working with the new recycling supervisor.
Great. Yeah, like you said, recycling not only is important for our environment, but it's also important for our wallets here. So we're going to keep getting the word out. And finally, my last question, again, can you just talk to the overtime? We know what the issues were. We know that we had to get the job done, and that increased the overtime, but it looks like you budgeted back down to levels that was closer to before. Do you think you have a good handle on it?
I'm sorry. It was yes. Yeah. So obviously when we're doing the split shifts, and prior to that, guys working, 12, 14, 16 hours. Now that we're back in a better place with the trucks, there's still overtime, but it's not to the point it used to be. The guys are rolling in, finishing their days around 5 or 6 o'clock at the latest now. So obviously that's been, a significant improvement, but that was just a function of the trucks. If you only have half as many trucks, your day's going to be twice as long, and that's what was happening. So, but yeah, we're in a much better place now.
Great, thank you. Any questions from members of the council on the Public Works, Recycling and Sanitation, page 44? Councilman Lattiser.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to concur with you, Eric, totally get it with the tipping fees. Right now, I'm paying $135 a ton. And a year ago, it was $75 a ton. It's absolutely incredible. And the basic price of a dumpster has gone from $450 to close to $800 now, in addition to those crazy things. So totally get it. A question I have, not so much pertaining to the budget, but it is about sanitation. How is it working out with using the Jefferson Boulevard location?
That didn't work out. Resource Recovery up in Johnston, they've had issues with waste management from other transfer stations, specifically Newport. So a little trash lesson. Curbside trash is considered to be the best kind of trash, right? It compacts easy, and so you don't have to worry about it as much. What Waste Management has done in the past, or allegedly done in the past, is they've taken that kind of good trash and they brought that to their facilities. And then they've taken the other trash, which is, bulky item pickups, right? So couches and chairs and things like that, and they brought those to Johnston. So curbside, they pick it up and they drop it off, they drop it off. The transfer station is 20 tons. Then they bring 20 tons up to the landfill, and it looks like it's the same, but that 20 tons is inequitable, right? And so when Resource Recovery saw we were using this waste management station, they initially were on board, but then were very reluctant after. And so it lasted for, what do we go through, 70 tons?
Maybe 2 weeks.
Yeah, maybe 2 weeks. We ended up doing about 70 tons, and that was it.
So they were taking the cream of the crop and leaving us with the
and
expense.
that was alleged, and I don't think it was happening with our stuff, just because the facility in Johnston, the facility here in Warwick on Jefferson Boulevard, or off of Jefferson Boulevard, is too small. They can't segregate the good stuff and the bad stuff. They were just pushing it all into one truck. But it was enough for Resource Recovery to kind of push back on.
Well, it's unfortunate because I, for one, thought that was a great idea, especially with the cost of fuel going to where it is now. But unfortunately, didn't work out. Okay. So on in the personnel supplement, sanitation recycling supervisor, I see the position. I understand why, I get it, but there's no job code. Is there a job code associated to that now? There's none posted in our booklet.
Should be. Hold on, let me look. It's in here. Maybe, let me see if I can find it right now.
There's a couple, not just in your department, there's a couple others. I was going through this again this morning that there's no job codes for.
Councilman, that's job code 446.
446, okay, thank you. And, to end it up, Eric, I think you and your department, in spite of, the obstacles that you've had facing you guys this past year, I think you've done a really good job. I can remember 6 or 7 years ago when I was sitting in the finance chair, I can remember saying to Christie that I expect you to do a little more with a little less. And that's exactly what you guys have done. And I'm really glad for both your staff and for our constituents that Mayor Picozzi has brought those troops back to work. That was a very unfortunate situation, what happened with your troops.
Yeah, and while we're talking about that, I just want to give credit to everybody because Terry's sitting up there, the water chief. We stole guys from water. There were previous operators from sanitation that had moved over to water, but they knew how to operate those trucks. So when we needed extra drivers, we stole them from water. We stole them from highway. The highway guys were out picking up bulky items, which is usually a sanitation thing. The mechanics were staying overtime or weekends working to get the trucks cleaned and fixed and properly maintained. So it was really a team effort. It was really, and it helped. I think it helped the sanitation guys seeing that they weren't the only ones feeling the pain.
Right.
And I think that went a long way. And everything that council has said publicly about their effort goes a long way as well, and we appreciate that.
Well, I mean, it's true. And in addition to those things that we've all mentioned, I'm sure my colleagues feel the same way. The communication with DPW and with the water department and us has been excellent for the past year and a half, 2 years. It's been really, really good. We got a direct line of communication. I know when there's issues with busted water pipes, we get a call, hey, just to let you know, if the water's blue, it's because we're testing the fire hydrants. That communication is really important, and we all appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Director. I completely agree with what everyone said about what you guys have done in a very challenging climate. My question is less about this year and more just about looking forward. So we know the landfill will fill and eventually will close. I think they were estimating like 2038 or something. So those tipping fees are never going down. They're always going to go up. So I just don't know what participation we have for the long term in whatever the next solution is.
We're looking at, we're working on a proposal. We're going to be sending something out, an RFQ, request for qualifications, for consultants to provide us with a feasibility study of a transfer station in the city. It came through the idea of using waste management. And as director in Pawtucket, we had the availability of a transfer station. It was a significant savings. And when you start thinking about direct hauling, right, we're picking up curbside and driving to Johnston. All right, if Johnston's not the option, where are we going? It might be Brockton, somewhere where they could probably put it on a rail. So now are we really picking up curbside and then driving a truck to Brockton or somewhere else? That's not feasible. And a lot of people say, oh, well, the state will figure it out. Okay, well, what if that's their answer, right? So it's nice to get out in front of it. And if we had a transfer station, at least we would minimize those trips. But again, we're in the very, it's just the infancy of that idea. But that's that's on our radar.
Yeah, no, good. I mean, it just helps to know that you guys are thinking about it, right? Because the day is coming.
Yeah,
and it'll be sooner than we all think.
It's a long-term and a short-term solution, because if we can do that, it would help us now with expenses. We wouldn't have that trip to Johnson, the wear and tear on the trucks, the fuel, which is going up every day. So the director's been thinking about this right along, and that landfill is going to close someday.
Thank you.
Any questions from the council on the Public Works Recycling and Sanitation? Any questions from members of the public on the Public Works Recycling and Sanitation budget on page 44? Just going to turn the mic on for you, sir.
Richard Langseth, Budlong Farm Road in Warwick. There's next door to us, there's a fire district, and it has its own tax base, it's its own municipality, it's its own government. And yet the city of Warwick is providing sanitation services to the fire district without any fee. Also, they're providing hydrant services, and in addition to that, of course, the street lights. And I just want to bring to the council's attention that this is an independent government, and certainly there are people living there who pay taxes to the city of Warwick, so obviously they should have services. But on the other side, the fire district should provide public access to all people. It's a constitutional issue. And I just wonder if, as long as the city's providing these public services, they should encourage the fire district to leave the streets open to the public. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Are there any additional questions from members of the public on the Public Works Recycling Sanitation?
Council President, can I add something?
What's that?
Can I add something? Can I talk?
If you would like, Mayor. Yeah.
Our sanitation crisis was caused by a lot of things. Old trucks. We were down mechanics for quite a while. Supply chain problems, things like that. We've addressed it. They've done great, the sanitation workers. But I want to, pat the city council on the back. You've been providing us with new trucks. It's what we really need. So, give yourselves a hand too. This was solved by the entire city in a cooperative effort.
Thank you, Mayor. And feel free to compliment the council anytime. Anytime you want to compliment us, you can raise your hand. Next up is the recycling, Public Works Recycling and Compost budget on page 44, same page. Any questions from members of the council on the recycling compost budget, page 44? Any questions from members of the public on the Public Works Recycling and Compost budget on page 44? Okay. Next up is Public Works Automotive. That can be found on page 45. Any questions from members of the council on the Public Works Automotive budget? Councilwoman Travis.
Thank you. So, Mr. Director here, I see on number 65-265, repairs to the fire department. Now, and that's a new item, right? Can you just explain that?
Yeah, so what had happened in the past with the fire apparatus when we would repair it, any kind of back charges, we would send over to the fire department and they would pay them through back charges and then would show up as a revenue item on our budget. But that essentially, from the budget standpoint, we'd be paying twice, right? So it comes out of our line item, it comes out of fire's line item, and it goes into our budget as a revenue item. So what this does, it kind of streamlines that. So when we spend money to fix fire apparatus, we'll just take it out of this line item, and that'll be it. It just kind of streamlines that process.
Okay.
Is that right, Christy?
Yes, and as well, with Public Works is responsible for fixing the fire apparatus, so we have the bid to do that. So it makes it easier for us to have their equipment fixed.
Yeah, good, thank you. Now, it says you have 13 people in automotive. Is there any vacancies there?
I believe we have one vacancy in, we're short one heavy equipment mechanic. Right now, where one of those heavy equipment mechanics is probably going to be going over to sanitation as an operator, so we'll be down two. But we are in the process of interviewing a couple candidates, so we're optimistic that we'll be back up to full staff But it's always tough when you have new people, you don't know what we're getting. But the people that we are interviewing have come recommended from people that we trust, and so we feel relatively confident that they should be able to hit the ground running.
Okay, and I see you have heavy equipment mechanic. Is that a new position?
Which one is that? I'm sorry.
Heavy equipment mechanic?
No, that's always been that we have 8 of those. That's the mechanic.
Because I know a lot of times we see things go out instead of being done with our own men, so I was wondering.
Yeah, there are certain times we have to send stuff out. Sometimes a fire apparatus will go out because of inspections or ladder work, things that need specific certifications to work on them. And then there's also like spring work that we can't do because we don't have the proper equipment. So certainly we do send some equipment out. But again, the mechanics are busy. They're putting in their 40 pretty easily and then coming in on the weekends as well. And
a lot of vehicles.
yeah.
I also see on number 65-281 steel materials. That one up.
Yeah, we've been seeing that type of increase across the board with with all of the products that we're purchasing.
Yeah, because all the prices have been going higher.
Correct. Yeah.
So, and this is something you really need.
Yeah.
And who is the automotive chief?
Jamie Van Geysen.
I'm sorry?
James Van Geysen.
Okay. I know a lot of people seem like they changed positions, so I wasn't sure.
He's been in that position now for about a year.
I got confused with sanitation. I was so used to Chris so many years. Now I'm going like, now I don't know who anybody is. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric, just to follow up on Councilwoman Travis's comments about the steel, your point is well taken. Not only are the prices accelerating rapidly, but the availability of product is very, very difficult. And your budget right here is a perfect example of where the prices are going on steel. So last year, or this current year, you're going to finish up somewhere around 6,500. You're looking at 13,000. That's not a number that surprises me or shocks me at all. But it also is something that we must keep in mind about building 2 new schools. Those buildings are all steel. This is a perfect example of what's happening with steel. The next thing that I'm going to ask you about is going to pretty much shock everyone, because every single budget, I come after everybody's gasoline and diesel fuel with an axe. This year, I have to ask you, why have you lowered your budget for 2023 versus 2022? I know that's a shocker for you guys, but I'm curious. Why'd you lower the number?
It's not lower. They're actually, diesel is $100,000 higher and unleaded is 50,000 higher.
But what I'm looking at here is 65,220.
Projections, right?
It's showing a year end with 335, and what you're asking for is 300 for 2023.
That's just the projected number at the time when the budget was submitted.
I'm just really surprised that you're asking for less moving forward than you're going to project your year end, given where the price of fuel is now. So if you're good with it, I'm good with it.
No.
But
It's so the fuel, I've actually done a little bit of analysis on this, and the fuel has definitely been a moving target over the last few months. Last week, I'm sorry, or 2 weeks ago, it was May 10th. We got a delivery of diesel fuel, and it was $5.62 a gallon. on April 28th, we got a delivery of diesel fuel and it was $5.39 a gallon. However, we also got a delivery of diesel fuel on May 20th and it was $4.68 a gallon. So we're hopeful that it'll keep going down.
Don't hold your breath. I'm hearing $10 a gallon. So that's what I'm hearing. I'm not saying it's coming from the top dog, but fine, as long as you guys are good with it. It's just something that I wanted to ask you on. On 65-618 fire department, it's showing a credit of $95,000. Is that what you bill back to them?
That was as of when this was
So
printed.
that's for this year, for 2023.
I'm sorry? Yes, but that's the end. So we still have to back charge the fire department for work that we do. We won't back charge them for anything we send out because we have the money in our budget now to be able to do that. But any work that we do in-house, we still have to back charge them for. So that's on our end as our credit, basically.
And interdepartment credit for gas, that's, I think, where police and fire get gasoline from you guys sometimes?
No.
Is that what that is? What is that then?
Police has their own fuel tanks, fire have their own fuel tanks. We service everybody else for fuel, every other department. Some of the smaller departments like the building department and community development, they get their fuel at the police station. But most of the major players that utilize city vehicles, they fill up. So we take care of the schools, we have field maintenance, highway, sanitation, sewer, well, not sewer, water.
Right.
So that's a
Transwick.
back charge to
Yes.
these
Yeah.
departments? Okay, got it. Okay, I'm all set, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Any additional questions on Public Works Automotive? Councilman Ricks.
I was also going to mention that same item that Councilman Lattiser mentioned regarding the gasoline and diesel. And I think that this is a trend throughout the budget that it's very difficult to know what the gas and diesel prices are. And unlike some previous years where Councilman Lattiser and other members of this council, including myself, have been comfortable cutting that number down from the proposed number, I feel that with the uncertainty of the gas prices, looking at the total amounts that were spent in previous years, and without having the ability to look into the future, predict the stock market, predict gas and oil prices, if we had the ability to predict that, then, well, we'd all be millionaires and we wouldn't have to worry about money. But looking at the numbers that are rather the fiscal year 23 proposed budget, comparing it to the fiscal year 22 projections, I feel like, and this is a comment, not a question, I feel like if we are low on those numbers, then because there are so many various line items across different departments for energy prices, the gasoline, the diesel, the electric, the natural gas, so many of these energy prices are all tied together that if we were to miss those numbers by 50,000 here, 100,000 there, or more, that very quickly adds up. So as a comment to my colleagues on the council, I don't think that I would be very comfortable with cutting those projected numbers for this year. And I have a certain caution that there may be a possibility that if commodity prices on energy that everyone has to pay go up, then we have to be prepared as a city for that possibility as well. And that might mean if we can't find the money elsewhere, then that would naturally result in a drawdown from the fund balance because we can't just leave public safety vehicles, DPW vehicles sitting in the driveway or the parking lot. We got to fill the tanks. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Gephardt.
Hi, Director. Just to understand the ins and outs here on the fire repairs, is there a credit back from that department for that line item?
Not for that line item. That's what we're trying to eliminate. So if they bring a rescue in, right, and we have to do work on the rescue, we have to order $5,000 worth of parts to fix the rescue. We'll take that $5,000 in parts out of that line item, and then essentially that's what that line item is for. Whereas in the past, we would do the work, pay the vendor, and then back charge the fire department.
Got it.
So that's kind of how that works. Or if we have to send something out to an outside vendor, if it needs springs or something like that, then that invoice will come in and we'll just pay that invoice right out of that line item.
And then, so what is 65,618?
That's the code. So when we back charge the fire department for any repairs that we do in-house, we send them a back charge form, and that's the code that we put on where we want it credited to. So they will take it out of whatever budget code is appropriate for them and credit it back to our 65,318. So basically, at the end of the day, it kind of balances our bottom line. Like the fire department's still paying for their repairs that we do, essentially.
In the current world, but I think we just said that in
So
the
there's two different line items. The one that's newly funded is for outside repair. Anything that we can't do in-house, we have to send out. The other one that's a credit is anything we do in-house that we back charge them for.
She got it right. I got it wrong. She just go right to Christie. Right.
Well, let me just ask. So the reason that's reduced is because formerly included in that were things that were sent out and things that were done in-house.
Correct.
And now it is just things that were done in-house.
That's
correct.
Any other questions on Public Works automotive budget? Any questions from members of the public on Public Works automotive budget, page 45?
Philip Dirkle, Senior, Ward 4. My question would be, when the city pivots to documented preventive maintenance plan, will these numbers change on the staffing and manning of this department?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. What was the question?
When the city of Warwick pivots to a documented preventive maintenance plan, not if, when, will the numbers of employees in this department fluctuate or change, or their duties change?
So the duties would probably change, but the personnel wouldn't. We've already started to implement a pretty robust program with regard to sanitation equipment. And I know that, you know, what you're saying in Mr. Potter's email and all that, and that's exactly what we've been doing for the last month or so with the preventive maintenance program to those vehicles. We're looking to expand it to the rest of the fleet, but, you know, when we bring mechanics on and we have a full complement of mechanics, then that's when we'll be able to kind of be more on top of the preventive maintenance kind of fleet-wide. Right now, we're concentrating primarily on the sanitation trucks because they're the oldest, they're the ones that we've had trouble with, and they're the ones that put the most stress on the mechanics. As we start to get them to a place where preventive maintenance is only taking an hour rather than 8 hours every time, we'll start to be able to pull more vehicles in to that preventive maintenance program.
Do you have a time frame when this will occur, or?
Like I said, we're doing it right now.
So if I request the documentation, I can see that? I can see a preventive maintenance program documented at Department of Public Works in Warwick?
Yeah, I mean, we have a book where the guys fill out the slips and indicate that they've walked around the vehicle, checked all the things it's supposed to check, and they keep one slip in the truck, they hand the other slip to the automotive division. Anything that raises the red flag, then, if we have 10 trucks and we only need 9 the next day, we'll pull that 10th one off and we'll address whatever that red flag was, right? And so then that one gets put back out, and then we'll pull another one out if there are any issues. So that's what we're doing now. And yes, that documentation is at Public Works.
Yeah, that's the operator checklist. That's a small part of a documented preventive maintenance plan. That's just a small part of it. So, again, thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional questions from members of the public on Public Works Automotive, page 45? Next up is Public Works Building Maintenance, page 46. Any questions from members of the council on Public Works Building Maintenance? Questions? Councilman Ricks.
I see that the projection for fiscal year 22 on line item 66-101 ends up at approximately $535,000. Fiscal year 23 proposed budget is $762,000. So I wanted to ask about whether this was a result of unfilled positions becoming filled, or otherwise if there are new or otherwise unfilled positions that are being proposed to be filled for fiscal year 23.
I'm sorry, we're talking about overtime?
Line item 66-101, salaries.
Oh, all right. Yeah, I mean, that adjustment is primarily due to the contractual.
Yes, but if you're looking at the projection, we've had some vacancies as well as people out long-term in all divisions, essentially. So that's reflecting, that projection number is reflecting that they're on a leave of absence for the most part.
Yeah, and building maintenance currently has 3 vacancies. One is an HVAC maintenance person, then there are 2 building custodians. So that would obviously show up or not show up in the projections, which would throw that number off a bit.
And then the intent is to fill those vacancies?
Yes. Yes, the HVAC position we've had trouble in the past filling, but certainly the 2 building custodian positions, I believe one is currently posted, and one position is posted, but I'm not sure if it's posted as 1 vacancy or multiple vacancies. I'd have to check that. But we are looking at outside people for that position.
Thank you.
Any questions from members of the council? Councilman Gephardt.
Thank you. In the personnel supplement, I'm trying to understand the field maintenance operator salaries comparative to FY22 budget.
Councilman, that's in budget code 70.
Oh. Okay. At ease.
Any additional questions on Public Works Building Maintenance from members of the council. Any questions from members of the public on Public Works Building Maintenance, page 46?
Philip Durkle, Senior, Ward 4. Do any of these employees on our buildings perform preventive maintenance, like changing filters, high vac units? Do we have a documented program, or is it done external to the DPW? Or
No,
is it both?
That's actually an excellent question, Phil. Thank you. We're actually, one of the new positions in here is we're looking at the building maintenance repair person. Building maintenance, when they move into the Sawtooth building, we'll be vacating several of the buildings that we currently maintain, Buttonwoods, Holden. So one of the discussions that we had with the mayor and the administration was we may not need the building custodian, but it would be nice to get some more skilled personnel on the building maintenance staff. And that's one of the things that we're looking at with this extra position is someone that is a jack of all trades type of person that can assist with the type of preventive maintenance you're talking about. Someone that can make sure that the filters are being changed on the HVAC equipment, or do, minor plumbing or minor, electrical stuff in that regard. And we do have a preventive maintenance, kind of schedule, but it's an Excel spreadsheet, right? And so it's maintained that way. And I know that we've talked to MIS, and we had a brief conversation outside last night about this. If we're able to incorporate, Munis has a capability for a preventive maintenance thing like that. If we're able to incorporate something like that, that would be real nice, because rather than just checking the Excel spreadsheet, you'd get a notification like, hey, check the HVAC filters at City Hall, right? And that's the direction we're moving. And this additional person would be integral to that process.
Excellent, thank you, and we'd be willing to help you with that as part of the public with that program or plan. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you, sir. Any additional questions from members of the public on Public Works Building Maintenance?
Council President,
Councilman Snappy.
just a question. That Munis capability that you mentioned, would that be included under our current setup, or would that have to be added?
Yeah, that would be a question for
Oh, don't worry about it. I can-
Luch. He's saying yes, though. He's nodding his head, so.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it looks like it would be included.
Any additional questions? Okay. Next up is Public Works Engineering, and that is on page 47. I have a question, Director. Can you give us an update on the street lightings, the conversions, where we're at on that, and how that's going?
That whole process was that the switchover was managed by planning, so I'm not 100% familiar with the status. I know that we might.
It's nearly done.
It is nearly done. I think a lot of what's left are a lot of the decorative lights. I know that down in Patuxent Village, I don't think those have been done yet. And that's typically the last step in the process. But yeah, once that's completed, and I believe we've already started to realize some of those savings, but I'm not 100% sure. Not yet.
Thank you. And just a reminder for everybody, the city is converting the street lights to LED lights, which will eventually see savings. And we did that. We are also now, when the lights goes out, we have a contact within the company there that will go in and fix it. And I'm happy to share that email with my colleagues on the council or members of the public. I contacted them about 3 weeks ago. A resident had contacted me. Street light was out. It was one of the new ones. sent the email, woman called me back, gave her the poll number. Within 2 weeks, it was back on. So far, so good. Any questions from members of the council on Public Works Engineering? Councilwoman Travis.
Mayor, 67406 Greenwich Bay Stormwater Program. I see where it went way up. What we doing different?
I'm sorry.
The Greenwich Bay Stormwater Project.
Yes.
It went up, so what are we doing different?
So we haven't done much stormwater stuff in the last couple of years, and that item is to help bring us into compliance with DEM's requirements. What we anticipate using that money for this year is one of the big things that we've fallen behind on is what's called IDD, illicit discharge detection elimination. So it's finding areas where the flow is coming out that's not supposed to be. Like if it's a dry weather and a pipe is still flowing, that could be a problem. We are supposed to be out there within a certain amount of time after a rainfall or before rainfall to check that. The problem with trying to do it in-house is just it requires a lot of people in a very short amount of time. You got to get out there and sample 100 outfalls in a day or 2 days. We had Crossman Engineering did it in 2018 and started that process. They identified a handful of locations that we should follow up on, where there was some, nothing egregious, but certainly some areas where we should kind of chase it up the pipe and see where that's coming from. So this would go towards assisting with continuing that process. And also, one of the other areas that we're looking is to do a better job with public outreach. In 2017, I believe, when I was here as a city engineer, we hired Southern Resource Conservation District to come in and assist, and they had a couple planting seminars that they did after hours. They set up a website for the city about how to keep the water clean. They helped us put out some flyers, and we're looking at doing that again. And all of this is, again, it's all part of the notice of violation that we have from DEM and all the things that we're supposed to be checking off that we really haven't in the last couple of years.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that we're going to be addressing it. This is really good.
Yeah.
And I know Councilman Lattiso gave some praise to your department when he was in highway, and it's hard to praise just anyone, because I know when I get calls, I could get 10 calls, and 8 of them is a public works problem. And you guys, I know you guys all do, do good. Sometimes you can't get out there exactly, but you got 9 wards to do, and I understand that. But public works is probably the hardest working department that's out there, because you got like 10 departments when you add them all up.
I would certainly agree with you.
But it's, I appreciate it, and I want to make sure everybody, all the workers and everybody, the supervisors, that you're doing a good job and to keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Eric, I see that there's a new position, building maintenance repair, job code 209. What is that position?
We going back to building maintenance?
Sorry? Am I in the wrong document? I'm in building maintenance.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're in engineering.
We're
All
on
right,
engineering
never
now.
mind.
That's okay.
I should ask you that question before.
But that was the one I was addressing to Mr. Dirk Cole.
Okay.
That's the position we're trying to add a little bit more skill to the building maintenance staff so we can do some of those things.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Any questions about engineering?
Oh, I was distracted, Mayor, because you were coughing. It distracted me.
Any additional questions for members of the council on Public Works Engineering? Any questions for members of the public on Public Works Engineering, page 47?
Philip Durko, Ward 4. I feel bad now coming up here and asking a question. I mean, everyone has patted Eric on the back on the great job he's doing, and Christie should get some credit as well. So I feel bad now making any comments at all. Just want you to know that. We have a different view. So again, I'm not going to go into that. The question I have on this section is the Greenwich Bay Stormwater Project. That was part of the consent decree, I believe, in 2016, Eric?
No, no.
No, it's not? Okay.
That line item, and I don't know why it's still called that, but that's been in there for a long time. But it did start to get more significantly funded as a result of that notice violation, yes.
So that's why it's going to 80 grand in
Correct.
2023? Okay, thank you.
Hi, Richard Langseth, Budlong Farm. Some people here may recall the Greenwich Bay Special Area Management Plan that we spent several years developing. And I, for one, won an award, a national award for the progress that we made on that. And a large part of it, of course, is stormwater runoff. And this, in the early 2000s, there was a great public participation in this. And you folks may know that people are becoming much more concerned about shoreline access now. And there's a Facebook group with almost 5,000 members in it who are very active in shoreline issues as such. And I believe that if we work closely together, we could get public participation to monitor some of these outfalls. We could have an adopt an outfall position. Of course, the problem is that there'll be perpetrators of creating these problems. So you have neighbor against neighbor. So what happens if I'm monitoring an outfall and some jerk is pumping their washing machine stuff into the outfall. So there's a little bit of contention here, but I think you'll find that as Warwick grows and expands and develops more and more people moving in who really want a better Warwick, Boston commuters, people like that who are paying big bucks for their houses now. I think you'd find far more interest in public participation, and I think there should be a department. I don't know if Public Works is the right one, but it could very well be, who can help organize that kind of effort. And certainly those of us who were involved in the original SAMP program would be willing to participate and help volunteer and find that kind of thing. This is very, very important, by the way. I mean, if you remember the fish kill in the early 2000s, the hundreds of thousands of dollars were put aside to fix the bay. And yet, 20 years later, we seem to have forgotten all of that. So anyway, that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any additional questions from members of the public on Public Works engineering budget? Okay. Next up is Public Works field maintenance, and that is found on page 49. And just a point to point out, back in 2020, 2021 actual, this item was in a different department, so we didn't just start funding this department in 2022. This was under Parks and Recs in the previous administration. So that's just a note there on the budget. Any questions from members of the council on Public Works field maintenance budget? Councilman Gephardt.
Okay. So my only question here really is about field maintenance operator. There's, in the personnel supplement, there's 8 positions with a total allowance of $534,000 and change. That comes out to $66,835 average for those roles. Last year, 7 positions, 396. So the average was 59,174. And the year before that, I'm sorry. Last year, 56,681. And from the document that you shared with me today, they're at 59,174. And the positions in there, most of the ones that I've seen in this situation, there's been like new employees who have recently hit a significant step. But from what I can see in this document, all these folks have been here for a significant amount of time, and I don't see any added step increase. So that one just looks a little out of whack for me. I don't need the response right now, but if you want to just go look at those roles, but it does look like something, either maybe the position count is off on either last year or this year, or something else. But I just wanted to note that, and if you can look into it, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilman. Any questions from members of the council on Public Works field maintenance? Any questions from members of the public on Public Works field maintenance, page 49? Any questions from members of the public, Public Works field maintenance, page 49? Okay, next up is Thayer Arena. That is on page 48. This is also DPW as well. Director, last year at this time, we were talking about getting the pool open. Very pleased that all the work went into that to get that going. Now we're getting the questions. We've all gotten the emails on the warm pool, the hot pool. How are we doing on that? I believe that at the last meeting, we put some money towards that.
Yeah. Are we on McDermott? Did I miss something?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so the short answer is that we've secured the vendor the 25% down. They're ordering the parts, and they're going to provide us with a schedule once those parts come in. And you know, if you don't recall the long story, we had them, and we're going back and forth for a while. They wanted a down payment. You know, essentially my argument was that's not something the city does. It went up to the mayor's office. We got them all together on the phone, and the mayor worked with them, and you know, essentially they were asking for half. And so through that negotiation, they came down to the 25%. But that's kind of where we are right now. They've been issued that 25%, and they're ordering the materials. When that whole conversation started, he had told me if we move it fast, it could be September. But again, I wouldn't. Well, now it's out there, but that might be optimistic.
Yeah, thank you. No, I just wanted to point it out. I know we worked on this at the last council meeting, but I just want the residents to know that it is a priority. We are working on it, but there was a number of different things, as the director just pointed out, which is causing the delay. Any questions from members of the council? Councilman Sinapi.
Why the large drop in building maintenance as far as what's budgeted for 2023 versus what was budgeted for 2022? I'm assuming because that's how much we ended up needing in 2022, but just wanted to make sure. Oh, and that's line item 41331.
Councilman, we've had some significant problems at the ice rink. Aside from the major repair that was done, we've had a few other things happen. Most recently, we requested permission to have a $35,000 repair done, as well as buy 80 cylinders of the refrigerant that's required. So that was probably about $70,000. So we had to transfer money into that budget code. So historically, it's budgeted at $50,000, but because of the amount of repairs that have gone on, we had to move money in to make sure we can, this in particular is to open the front rink. I don't know if you remember, we discussed how we can't open the front rink until the repair is done because it's leaking refrigerant. So that's where we're at. The transfer, yeah.
Yeah, so that 125 that you're seeing, that reflects a significant transfer into that, but that original budget started at 50,000.
Yeah, thank you.
Any questions from members of the council on Thayer Arena? Any questions from members of the public on Thayer Arena, page 48? Any questions from members of the public on Thayer Arena, page 48? Okay, next up is the pool on page 48 as well. And I apologize, I talked about the pool at the rank instead of the rank of the pool, breaking my own rules, so I apologize. Any questions from members of the council on McDermott swimming pool? Any questions from members of the public on the McDermott swimming pool, page 48?
Philip Durcol, Ward 4. I'd like your indulgence, Council President and council members. Very encouraged with this meeting. Very encouraged with the positive remarks from Director Earls. We believe, the public believes, that a preventive maintenance program is essential to what we have to accomplish in this city. And the positive approach by Mr. Earls is gratifying to us, to the public. Thank you. And thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Any additional questions on the McDermott swimming pool, page 48? Okay, next department is personnel. Thank you, Director. Thank you, Christy. Personnel is going to be on page 14. Thank you, Councilman. Page 13. Page 13. Good evening, Director. Thanks. Director, if you got to get right into that mic so we can hear you. So if you could just introduce yourself one more time.
Oh, Stephen Rotondo, Personnel Director for the city.
Good evening. Do we have any questions from members of the council on the personnel budget, page 13? Questions from members of the council on the personnel budget? Councilman Lattiser.
Thank you. Director, on item 15101, the proposed budget for salaries has increased by about $70,000. And what is the reason for that?
Salary increase is all 2.7.
Can't hear you.
You got to bring it right to you. Sorry.
The salary increases we have no recommended increase in salaries. It's basically a 2.75% across the board. And there's also an added position at 40,000.
What's the position that was added?
It's been given a name of Sawtooth Concierge, or Building Concierge for the Sawtooth Building.
Yeah, that was spoken to briefly last night. So tell us about, there's no code assignment to that either. That's another one of the items I spoke about earlier. It didn't have a job code assignment to it. So what's the responsibilities going to be of that person? Is this person a floater, is going back to do different things in different places? What is that job?
That's a good way to describe it. It's a floater. It's going to be like a substitute. We talked about it a little bit last night.
Right.
When a department needs someone or due to illness, whether they need extra help, like tax collectors, tax sale time, things like that. That's what the concierge is going to be responsible for,
Okay.
as well as being a receptionist for the building.
And you say in addition to the 40, it's the contractual raise of 2.75?
Yes, oh, for the road, yes, it's 2.75 across the board.
Was there any additional increases beyond the 2.75?
No. According to the mayor,
Because-
there better not have been. No, I tried, but no, that's it.
No, what I mean by that is whether there was any step increases or longevity, because if I put the 2.75 onto your projection for this year and add in the 40,000, I come up with 364,000, not 392. So I was wondering where that $28,000 difference is coming from.
Yeah, we might have had one staff person go up in longevity increment. Those longevity increments, so as you go up, are 1%. So I don't think there should be any increase beyond 275 and the 40.
Well, either there was or the number is not right, because if one person has a step increase, I don't think it's going to increase by 28 grand. So the numbers don't make sense based upon what you said.
I'll have to check into the numbers. I don't, pardon? Oh, I see. Well, our projection is, we're projected to come in below the 2022 budget. Am I understanding your question?
Your proposed budget for 2023 is $392,732. Your projection for 2022, where I'm basing my numbers from, is $324,472. So you're looking to increase that year-end number.
Our projection is based on having had a vacancy. So that projection, we should come in low this year on our projected budget because we had a vacancy.
Okay. You had a vacancy for the whole year?
No, we have a vacancy, and it's not for the whole year, though. No.
And that's what you're saying is that's why you're down 20,000 from the proposed budget for 2022? Is because you had a vacancy or a partial vacancy?
Yes, that should explain it, because we had one vacancy. Everyone else is there, and I don't think there's been any other changes.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions from members of the council on the personnel budget, page 13? Any questions from members of the public on the personnel budget?
I have a question on line item 349, random drug and alcohol testing.
Yes.
Why is it that we don't have that in the city of Warwick?
No, we do. Some years ago, we decided to charge back the departments. So really, our customer for CDL, the program is robust, it's ongoing, and we charge back Department of Public Works most of our CDL drivers now that they've been combined with field maintenance. It's almost all of them are right there, and we charge them back.
So how often is there drug testing?
It's quarterly. So the random testing is quarterly. So you get tested when you're a new employee. We have to do a license verification check, and you get a pre-employment test, drug alcohol test. We arrange that through our office. We charge the department back for all of that. we contract out to a company for the random testing, for it to be truly random. We give them all of our people who are active on our list, and they randomly pull every quarter, and they send us the names. And then we send the names to the department on the day that actually we have a truck that goes to DPW, because that's where they all are. And you say it's random testing, we give them the names, and anyone there that day, some people aren't always there, gets tested. And if we miss them, there's another attempt. If not, they should go back into the pool for the next testing.
So the employee doesn't know ahead of time that they're going to be tested.
No, they should not know ahead of time.
And if have we ever had situations where employees, for whatever reason, have had to have intervention, either because of the use of alcohol or drugs? I guess my question would be, if hypothetically, if that did happen, are they subject to different scrutinies under the testing?
So what happens is if a person tests positive, or if for the first time, or if they refuse the test, it's considered a positive test. And if that occurs, and this is all driven by the federal standard, CDL standards. We have our own policies, but they're based on the federal policies. The person must be given an opportunity for rehabilitation. And when that person completes rehabilitation and is certified that by rehab counsel that they've completed, rehabilitation, we then schedule them for, reemployment or return to work test. And if they pass that test, they can go back in the pool, they can go back to work. And they go back into the random pool, and it's a random pool, but I think that once that happens, we're just guessing from what we see that the random is a little bit more random for that person after that.
So if they do test positive and they're like an equipment operator or something along the line, machinery, that they removed from their duty at that time until they test clean?
They're removed from, they're on leave at that point. To the extent that they have medical time that they could take to get into rehab. If it's outpatient, we don't let them come back. If they're on that list, it's because they have a CDL and they're operating or may operate a commercial vehicle for us. We're not letting them come back until they're certified and tested again.
So in the event, like say you have a multiple offender, like is there some type of like a 3-strike rule? Or, so like do you draw the line at one point and say, hey, listen, you can't work for the city of Warwick?
The second time is you're terminated.
Oh, okay, good. All right, great, thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions from members of the public on the personnel budget?
Council President?
Yep.
So, Mr. Cody actually made me think of this. So, do we comply with the federal and state law regarding random drug testing? Do we comply with federal and state law regarding random drug testing?
The CDL testing program is driven by federal legislation.
Yep.
And so I don't know that there is state legislation. We comply with the federal CDL guidelines.
Yeah, and that'll preempt when it comes to CDL. But so in regards to when it's not involving a CDL, do we follow the state law?
We don't have a testing program. No, we don't test. The only employees that are tested for drug and alcohol use for the city of Warwick are employees who are on our CDL, commercial vehicle operators. We do not have an employee testing for the remainder of the city.
Got it. Thank you.
Any additional questions on on personnel? Okay. Next up is employee benefits on page 51. Employee benefits. Can we have the administration? I think people have a lot of interest in OPEB trust funding, $250,000. This will be the second year that we are funding this line item. If we could get the administration to speak on that, please.
Yes. So this is just a continuation of last year's appropriation. If you read the mayor's message, and the council approved using the city's pension actuary to come up with a long-term strategy to address our OPEB liabilities and also our pension funding. And we hope to have the actuary here. We just need to work out the timing. And it wouldn't be right for me to, I know the detail, the substance of the plan, and there's some really great ideas in there. Haste makes waste on this, and we want to do it right. We want you to hear from the actuary, the Municipal Retirement Board to hear from the actuary. So we hope sometime this summer or early fall that we will get him here and we will have a full vetting of the different options that are available to us. He will be here. As a matter of fact, I think he's scheduled to be at the Municipal Retirement Board. We're working on that for June 22nd. And we need to work with the council president and the council.
Correct. We're going to work
whether
on a
he'll
date to have him come
at
to the
that time
council.
or some later time. He's ready to come. He's ready and willing. We just have to get the right date.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the council on the employee benefits? Councilman Lattiser.
Thank you, Mr. President. Peter, yesterday you had said that there was no increase to us on the cost of healthcare. So I'm assuming that line item 75,162, healthcare fire, that increase is because of the new hires?
Yes. That's assuming, I think, 30 new hires at approximately $20,000 a contract.
Yeah, I was looking at some numbers earlier today, going over, rehashing some of the stuff from last night, and the school department had said that their family plan was somewheres around 22,000. I'm going to be putting a call into them because the numbers that I was putting together earlier today are higher than that. So that's a little interesting. But, the bottom line here with this healthcare is if we don't take control over these expenses that just continue. Oh, by the way, the school department did get back to me with their unfunded OPEB liabilities. It's about 38,000 is what they have. Our unfunded healthcare liability could never be paid. And I know everybody's tired of hearing that, but sooner or later, that thing's going to come home to roost. So until the time comes when we're willing to, wrestle that monster and get control of these healthcare costs, it's going to continue to be a significant burden and a growing burden on all the taxpayers. But it'll be interesting to have a chat with the actuaries when they come in. When did you say that was proposed, that they were coming in, the actuaries? Are you working on a date? Okay. What time frame are you shooting for?
Councilman, we're working on a date, summertime to early fall.
I think, again, this is my personal opinion, early fall would probably be a lot more conducive for everyone. People are on vacation in the summer. Our residents and taxpayers are on vacation. Members of the administration and the workforce are on vacation. We're on vacation in July and August. I think my recommendation, for whatever it's worth, would be for early fall sometime so that we can hopefully have this chamber filled with people who are concerned with that, like other issues that come up. So just my suggestions. Thank you.
Whatever the council's pleasure would be.
I'm sorry?
Whatever the pleasure of the council is, we'll get him here.
I'm sorry, Mayor, I still couldn't hear you. I'm getting old, I can't hear.
I don't have much of a voice on today. Whatever the council desires, that's when we'll get him here.
Thank you.
Additional questions from members of the council on employee benefits, page 51. Councilman Ricks.
First brief item to pick up on Councilman Lattiser's point. I think that it would be important for the actuaries to present to the city council before voting on any ratification of collective bargaining agreements. So if that would mean that the actuaries present to us sooner rather than later, I would support that. Let's see. The questions that I have, first, I wanted to ask about the OPEB funding for the present year, fiscal year 22. It was my understanding from earlier in the year that not everything had proceeded quite as anticipated with the contract, how that was implemented, that a term in the contract that there was a conflict with the law such that it couldn't be enforced relative to the individual accounts. So I wasn't sure if that had been resolved or if it's one of those items that is currently being discussed.
I mean, the 250,000, that was not an issue. And we've opened the trust. They have our money. They're investing it. That is ongoing. There was an issue with contract language in the expired fire contract, or the fire contract that's going to expire June 30th. And they're in collective bargaining. I know that the subject has come up, but I don't know any more than that. I'm not involved in negotiations.
Thank
And
you.
even if I was, I wouldn't be able to tell you. That's the way it works.
Let's see. Other than that, I'm not sure if there are any discussions with other collective bargaining units, and I know that the contracts are not yet, it's not as if the other two contracts are coming up during fiscal year 23, but it was previously my understanding that with one of the other collective bargaining units, there had been some additional discussion of getting a deal worked out.
Built into the Council 94 agreement, which is the most recent one with the police agreement, there is a discussion to sit down and discuss OPEB's funding. So that's built into the contract. I don't think we have had a meeting yet on it, but they're aware and they understand the shared responsibility in this because it's their members who, benefit from it.
Thank you. And so in that event, I take it that perhaps the city, if there's a matter of matching, then the city might be interested in increasing that amount. But at this point, we're really just talking about a contingency. So that's why the proposal for fiscal year 23 is at that same 250,000. Mike?
I'm not sure I understood what that question was.
Okay, so I know that the 250,000 relates to the city paying its share in relation to the contract with the firefighters union. I imagine that if there is an OPEB funding deal that's worked out with our municipal labor employees, then I imagine that that wouldn't be one-sided, where they're the only ones who are contributing to OPEB, but I would imagine that it would probably be along the same lines in which the city is also contributing to OPEB as well as those employees. And so I'm speculating here that the reason that there isn't funding above the 250,000 for fiscal year 23 is because there's nothing yet set in stone with those municipal employees, and so we're not funding an unknown contingency, just like with other contracts. We're not putting numbers in the budget, setting them in stone like that, so to speak. Not that putting it in the budget is setting it in stone necessarily, but rather it's a matter of not funding that contingency, even though we hope that a deal is worked out.
Yes, we're hoping, expecting a deal. And as for the outcome, I never try to predict negotiated outcomes. So,
Yeah, and
Mr.
I
Schaefer
can,
might have a better sense of it, but I just don't even try to predict negotiated outcomes.
and I can certainly appreciate that. We don't want to, as part of a budget hearing, have a full public discussion of items that are being negotiated. Let's see. What I will say, just on the record, is that similar to last year, this coming Thursday, or whichever day we have votes on amendments, and the vote on the budget as a whole, last year I desired and made a motion to amend to increase the line item for the OPEB trust funding, and I would intend to do the same again, because I'm concerned about the long-term funding of that, and think that the city should be increasing funding of that line item to make sure that we're on the right track. So a general question about the OPEB trust funding, and I understand that we haven't had the actuaries present in a little while, and we do intend to have the actuaries present in the near future. But do we have an estimate on how much we should be putting in there in order to be making an annual, well, I don't want to say, use that term of art of annual required contribution is similar to the pensions, but if this were a situation analogous to pensions, do we know what number we would need to be putting in that line item in order to keep up actuarially with the city's liabilities?
Well, I would say that when the actuary comes, he's going to be able to talk to that. And I think it's important that we continue some contribution. It's an important thing to our financial statements of the city, that we now, our footnote is going to change. Instead of just speaking about the liability, it's going to be able to speak to the fact that we've established a trust, we're putting away money, we can disclose that we're working with the actuary to come up with a long-term funding plan. But I want him to tell you those numbers, not me, or the mayor, or the personnel director.
I can appreciate that. Suffice to say, it would be multiple millions of dollars per year.
Certainly going to be more than $250,000 a year. I'll give you that much.
Thank you.
Any additional questions on employee benefits from members of the council? Any questions from members of the public on employee benefits, page 51? Councilman Lattiser.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Peter, I want to go back to the comment that Councilman Ricks made regarding the OPEB language in the firefighters' contract. It was several months ago, we were on a Zoom meeting, and you had informed us at that time that that was not a legal item in that contract. In addition to that, you had said that the actuary at that time had misrepresented that to us. And there was obviously some significant concerns on your part with that entire process. So I heard what you said. It's not something that you're able to discuss at this time, But my question is there discussion taking place as to how to correct that error?
Oh, first of all, I'm not sure that the former actuary misrepresented. I don't think they knew what the details of the
I'm just
contract were.
repeating what you had stated.
Really, I think Bruce would have to respond to the second part.
Okay,
of the question.
Bruce?
In negotiations with the fire union, I can share that the executive board for the union has raised the issue. They're willing to discuss modification of the language in the existing contract that is not compliant with the IRS regulations regarding establishment of an OPEB trust, and so it's an active and ongoing item. And they said they have some ideas. We haven't had that discussion in full yet, but it's ongoing.
And that'll be a discussion that'll be coming back to us?
At the time that the contract proposals are agreed to and a tentative agreement is reached, then it would, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Members of the public, questions on employee benefits?
Yes, pertaining to healthcare, I can remember in 2016 when the actuaries were here, and then Councilman Marola, sitting right there in Mr. Gephardt's seat, said to the actuaries, will there be a time frame when we reach the point of no return with unfunded healthcare liabilities? And his answer was, yes, Mr. Marola, that was 5 years ago. There's been no change. I see absolutely no discipline from then until now with administrations to make any type of changes that at least will recognize while the people in this room are still alive. It's just not going to happen. I just don't see it. I don't see the motivation. But speaking of healthcare, I have a question on an issue that was raised on public social media on the mayor and his staff who did not have their healthcare co-pays reduced from their paychecks, which mounted to several $1,000s, $16,000, $17,000. And I understand now we've received documents showing that the mayor has given himself 65 weeks and his staff 65 weeks to pay back $5,000 and I think $2,800 respectively. So I have a couple questions. Number one, what gives the mayor the authority to give himself a 65-week payback for monies that were not withdrawn for his health care copay?
Hold on one second, please. I just get clarification. So the healthcare budget line we can talk about, but a personal plan is not in this budget here, so we can't address the personal plan.
For sure it is. It's healthcare municipal.
But not for an individual person you're asking about.
I'm not asking about individual person. I'm asking about employees.
You asked about a specific employee.
I'm asking about several specific employees, and it's definitely relevant. And the reason it's relevant is because the mayor has usurped the city charter 56-2. And let's go to the city solicitor on that, the city council solicitor, because the ordinance specifically states that no agreement and no contract in excess of $2,500 can be made without approval of the city council.
Okay,
And
but
it
that's not
also
before us at this time. We're on
well,
employee benefits.
it is. And I think that the mayor should be able to address this issue. He addresses it on social media. I think you should stop running interference and let the mayor speak about this. And I'm going to tell you why, and I'll leave you with this statement.
Sir, I'm just saying we are sticking to the budget
It is the
This is,
budget.
an employee benefit. We are not supposed to talk about individual.
I'm not talking about
people.
individuals.
You
I'm
already
talking
named
about
an
the
individual.
dollar amount.
Sir, I'm not going to argue with you. It is.
Mr. McAllister, you're continually trying to shut people down that have relevant points. This is about $17,000. It's relative to the budget. It's about the money. So let's take the personnel out of it. There was $17,000 that was misappropriated from healthcare co-pays. How did we enter an agreement usurping the city charter, usurping the legislative branch of government, and one individual making the call to give everybody 65 weeks to pay it back? The reason that's concerning is this. Those people are all making six figures. If they don't have $5,000 and $2,800 to write the check and pay it back, that tells me that you're financially irresponsible, and that's problematic because that puts you in a compromised position. And the mayor should be able to speak to this. He speaks to it on social media. He's here now. He hasn't said one word.
Okay,
through
sir.
10 hours
Do you
of
have any
hearings.
additional
I'd like to
questions?
hear from you, Mr. Mayor.
Sir, I gave you your time. Do you have any
My
additional questions?
time's not up, and I want an answer.
Okay, Mayor, no, this is.
Are you going to run interference again, Steve?
Excuse me, sir. This is a council meeting. We are talking about employee benefits on page 51. You made your statement. If you want to speak to the mayor at
Employee
another time on
benefits,
this,
I'm asking
you
a
can.
question, and I'd like an answer. Oh, why are you telling the mayor not to answer? Don't you think he has the capability
Excuse
to
me,
answer
sir.
that?
Do you have any additional questions?
Yes, I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, since the mayor has now set a precedent that he, Mr. Schaefer, and whoever else can come up with these repayment plans of monies that we're not taking out, or employees that actually received excess money, because what it turns out to be. Where's your repayment plan with the unused sick pay with the firefighters? It's the same thing. And I don't think you understand that. And I don't think you understand the ability to be able to manage money, because it sets a precedent that people like me, we get nervous when elected officials that are being paid $100,000 and get misappropriated $5,000. You can't reach into your pocket and pay us back? And you don't have anything to say about that. And what about you, Mr. Schaefer? You've been in government for how many years? You're going to pay back $250 a month? You don't have $5,000 to reach in your pocket and pay it back? I think you guys should be embarrassed.
Excuse me. Again, we're not talking about people's personal finances here. We are talking about employee benefits, page 51. Do you have any additional questions,
Yes, I
sir?
do.
Okay.
Mr. McAllister, I don't think that you actually understand the concept.
Okay,
This
sir,
is not
sir.
personal. This is...
Again, sir, we are talking about employee
See,
benefits.
this is your
page
game.
51.
Interrupt people when they're trying to say, this is about city money.
Sir,
Here we go.
do you have any additional questions on
Yep.
employee benefits?
Yes,
page
I do.
51. Please ask them.
Employee benefits and the monies that pay for them come from the taxpayer. I'm sure you understand that. These individuals that their monies was not taken out for the health care plan need to repay the taxpayer, not over 65 months. If I didn't pay my sewer bill, is the mayor going to give me 65 months to pay it back? No, you know what he's going to do? He's going to put my house up for auction on a tax sale. So what makes him any different than anybody else? The only thing that I can see that makes him different from anyone else is he's fiscally irresponsible, and so are the rest of them. And so are you, Mr. McCall.
Thank you very much, sir. Any additional questions from members of the public on employee benefits? Next up is insurance. Insurance is on page 52.
Mr. President, I'd like to interfere for a moment and say that the speaker just again threw insults, and when he sat down threw more insults. There is a decorum in this council, and I'd like to ask the solicitor what the process would be. Enough from the screaming
Thank you.
from the
No,
audience.
Mr. Cooper, do not have the mic. Thank you, Councilman. We are now on insurance.
Mr. President.
Yep, if Councilman Howe, if you would like to speak to the solicitor, I will allow it.
Thank you,
course.
Mr. President. Thank you.
Solicitor.
Solicitor, when the president who runs this council meeting and the president who is the person that was designated by this council in these chambers to organize and run this meeting is continuously talked over, as well as insults are thrown at the council president, and the honored guest of the mayor, as well as members of this administration, and then the arguing and the name calling continues in the stands, I would like to know what actions can this council be given?
Thank you, Councilman. Pursuant to the rules, the president is responsible for implementing or governing, presiding over the body, and Rule 17 makes clear that there's a responsibility to help have remarks be limited to the question under debate and avoid making any personal attacks on others. And through Rule 19, the president shall enforce decorum of persons outside the rail while others are speaking, and it extends beyond. So, you know, the president is responsible for administering the decorum of the body, and that's what he's charged with.
And if the decorum is not maintained by a guest to this chamber, what are the options of this council?
The rules do not prescribe specific action as to what elements are required under what course of behavior, but it provides clear authority that the president would be given the authority to address situations that exist within the chamber. And I do believe we've brought in the sergeant at arms to assist in those in the past, and we've had more police and presence in the past to help regulate behavior.
Thank you. Then Mr. President, respectfully, I would end with this. I ask that we maintain, and this is addressed to everyone in the chambers, a level of decorum, professionalism, and civility so that we can have these, I'm sorry, I guess I'm done. No. So we can have decent and open discussions in an organized manner within these chambers without insults to the people who have decided to participate and represent the citizens of the city. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman Howe. We are now on the insurance, page 52. Are there any questions from members of the council on the insurance budget, page 52? Any questions from members of the public on the insurance budget, page 52?
Again, I'd like the council's indulgence for me to make a comment.
Is it on the insurance budget on page 52?
No, it's on what just happened in this
I'm sorry,
chamber.
sir, I need to, everyone has, I got to follow the rules for everybody, so we can only speak on the
Okay,
insurance
so-
at 52.
Thank you very much. That's why you see the chambers empty. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next up is council claims. Council claims is on what page? Council claims on the same page. Thank you, Councilman Foley. Any questions on council claims, page 52? Councilman Foley.
Told that I should be hopeful because Kilvert Road is scheduled to be paved. Is that correct? Can someone address that for me? And it relates to claims, Council President, because it is probably one of the biggest reasons we get claims is that road. Kilvert, is that scheduled to be repaved? I'm told, I was whispered to that it might be. Huh? Mr. Earl, just Kilvert Road, we're under claims, and since it's a cause of a large number of the claims that come before my committee, I was told to be hopeful that that was going to be paved in the near future.
I believe Kilvert, we're waiting on a couple developments, right? There are a couple developments that are happening on Kilvert, and I think that part of the development process or the development plans, they're incorporating some sidewalk work. And so we wouldn't pave the road until the sidewalk work is done. And I think that, I don't know, part of the development may also incorporate paving the road as part of that. But at a minimum, I think there's sidewalk work. And so we wouldn't do the road until the sidewalks are done, because otherwise, during the process of installing sidewalks, you tear up the road, so it would make sense, right? So I think that's where we are. That's why Kilvert is, it's on our radar.
It
but-
is on the list.
Yeah.
We wish we could do it right now,
Right,
but
but
we
it's
don't
on
want
the
we don't want
list.
to do it again in 3 years.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Council, anybody have any questions on council claims, not individual roads, please? It's a dangerous, dangerous game. Any on council claims? Any questions from members of the public on council claims, page 52? Any questions from council claims on page 52? Next up is postage. And postage is on page 53. Any questions from members of the council on the postage budget? Any questions from the council on the postage budget? Any questions from members of the public on the postage budget? Any questions on the postage budget from members of the council? Councilman Ricks.
Quick one. I see that the 22 year-to-date is at 54,000, projection at 86,000. I'm not sure why the 23 budget is significantly higher at 95,000. I do see that the 2020 fiscal year actual was at 95,000. So was curious as to the trends on that.
This number was just a compilation of department requests, and it totaled to that. Postage goes up every year, so.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Any other questions from members of the public or members of the council on the postage budget? Page 53. Councilman Howe.
I apologize, I didn't mean to yell out. I will also say, to follow up on Councilman Ricks, is that we also have many developments, many projects coming into the city, so therefore we're going to be mailing, oh no, that's not a this, that's a, that we got over 600 units being developed in the city. We have 800 units being developed in the city. We have numerous new houses, businesses. So obviously our outreach is going to be tremendous. So that would also probably add to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is fixed costs on page 53, fixed costs. Are there any questions from members of the council on fixed cost budget? Any questions from members of the council on fixed cost? Any questions from members of the public on fixed costs? Any questions on fixed costs? Okay. Next up is pensions. Pensions can be found on page 54. Are there any questions for the administration on pensions on page 54? Any questions from members of the council on pensions on page 54? Councilman Ricks.
As we all know, the police one and the fire one pensions are closed. We're on a 40-year plan. I'm trying to recall how many years until we get to the end of that 40-year plan.
I just read a document from 2016 saying there were 21 years left to go. So if I add, so around 15 years left on that plan. And it's something that when the actuary comes, he'll talk about.
All right, and I see that the fiscal year 23 budget, when you combine the line items 85,172, police 1, and 85,174, fire 1, adds up to a bit north of $20 million total for those closed out pensions that are on the 40-year plan, that where, let's see, 21 plus 6, about 27 years into.
Yes, and that's exactly the amount that the actuary indicated was our contribution requirement to continue with the 40-year plan that meets the annual required contribution.
And if I recall correctly, for the next several years, the amount is going to follow the trend line such that in future years, we're going to be paying more, not less?
To meet to comply with the ordinance that's currently in place, yes.
Thank you.
Any additional, Councilman Lattiser, sir?
Just a quick question on this. So is there any plan to have, I think his title is the actuary from the pension board, come before the city council as well?
Yes, because it's the same actuary now.
Okay, all the same.
You made
Okay.
it-
It's going to be interesting to
We switched to the,
see how some of our investment folks have been performing. But that's good. I look forward to having that information provided to us as
Yeah,
well.
I mean, the investment performance this past cycle was extraordinarily good. Might not be so good this year.
Not the past quarter,
but far in excess of the state's returns by their pension. But we did have some bad experience in retirement, especially in the municipal plan, for example. When there were a lot of layoffs 2.5 years ago, a lot of people retired at that time. So we had more retirements than the actuary would have expected us to have. So we had positive investment performance, but they average it over 5 years. So even if you make 30%, which we made in all of the plans, you only get 1/5 of that as toward the benefit. And we had some bad experience in terms of the number of retirements.
And I think we all realize that just in the last few weeks, we've dropped about 17% on those portfolios. But what I'm curious and interested in hearing is there was one particular investment firm that when I was on the pension board, 7 years in a row had not met the benchmark of the city or of their own benchmark. And the reasoning was because they were in the inflationary market. At the time, I had requested, actually on a couple of occasions, but on this last time, I had requested that other companies come before the pension board who were successful in the inflationary market. And then bingo, like everything else, COVID hit and that never came to be, so we never got to speak to those people. But that's one particular one I'm going to be looking for. I would certainly hope they met somebody's benchmark in the past year.
I'm very comfortable with the review that our pension advisor, they've been going 1.5 years. He's had different investment managers in. We've removed some managers. We've added some managers since I've been on the board, with Mr. Marciano doing due diligence on everything that's going on there.
I'm speaking about one entity.
I understand.
I'm not speaking about
the treasurer
board.
and the finance director have mimicked what the municipal retirement board does on investment managers.
I'm all set. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman. Any additional questions, Councilman? Just let me. Any additional questions that I haven't had a chance from council members? Councilman Ricks.
With the recent drop in the stock market, does that tend to affect the any of the line items here, whether it's for the closed out police fire 1 pension or the 3 active pensions?
These numbers are based upon the evaluation he did and the investment returns experience as of June 30, 2021. So come June 30, 2022, when he gathers, the actuary, the investment advisor, gather all the data, he will do another report, and that will obviously reflect some changes. And as I said, they only capture 1/5 of the gain in a year. So, and likewise, they'll only capture 1/5 of a loss in a year. They smooth the investment returns. So they'll be looking at both what's happened in terms of retirements and what the average investment earnings have been over a period of 5 years.
Thank you.
So we'll see a change in the contribution rate, either up or down next year based upon the different factors that come into play.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the public on pensions? Any questions from members of the public on pensions? Okay, next up is the capital budget.
Just,
I think DPW is going to come back for this one.
yes.
Here he comes.
Just both the,
Oh, they did.
I'd just like to, can I just talk about the challenge of the capital budget this year and just all of us finance directors around the state struggled with ARPA and how to present it in the budget to the public, to councils, and some municipalities did special ordinances just dealing with ARPA, and most of them had good flexibility in their charter to do that. Our charter doesn't really, it talks about an annual budget, talks about a capital budget. Some places flowed all of the ARPA right through the general operating budget, and I think our neighbors in Cranston, that's what they did. And I think from my following what happened, I think it was confusing to people. We've taken some of the ARPA money supporting the general fund, which we discussed earlier in the discussion, and that's referenced in the mayor's message. But most of it is in the capital budget. And if you review the council and the public, you review especially pages 2 and 3, this is the capital budget. It lists the ARPA dedicated projects we've identified. We've also had some luck with our congressional delegation on earmarks. For example, the $5 million for City Hall Plaza, which will go with another $3.5 million that's pledged in this budget from ARPA. There's a few minor things that are from operating budget, but most of the items that are identified in fiscal year 23 are from either ARPA or earmarks. We've pledged virtually all of the money, but my expectation is we'll be back for a last bite of the apple in the next budget. There's over $4 million pledged from ARPA in the current operating budget. When we do our financial statements, I'm hoping we won't have to use all that money. I'm hoping we won't have to use as much money because I think we've had conservative revenue estimates, and this is a conservative budget. I'm hoping we won't come anywhere near using the $10 million. A year from now, we will know, or 10 months from now, we will know. And I suspect that we will still have some ARPA availability to pledge a year from now. But most of these ARPA projects are multi-year. They're not, most of this money, a good part of it will be spent this year. Under ARPA, it has to be pledged by December 31st, 2024, and it has to go out the door by December 31st, 2026. So we could have a contract in place for City Hall Plaza. Or you know how long some of the equipment purchases have taken here. And part of the mayor's strategy on equipment purchases, these are things that we had a $6 million plan last year that we used lease purchase for. This year, we're using ARPA money that will avoid any payments going out 5 or 7 years. We'll take care of it using these ARPA funds. So That's the concept here. Avoid costs going out in the out years, but let's show that we're really using this money substantively, and that's what the items are listed here. And Eric is here because a good chunk of them are public works related projects, and I'm ready to continue. So I think really the three items, capital, water and sewer, and ARPA, really have to be considered they're all in the same budget item, same budget book in the capital budget, as well as the enterprise fund budgets.
Great, thank you for Director, and
It would
thank you
make
for,
more sense, Council President, if we could do ARPA and capital as one item and do water and sewer separate, because that also deals with their operating expenses. Just happens to be in the same document.
just going to get, okay, so we're going to talk about the ARPA that's in the capital now, and then we will keep the second to last item now, the ARPA one, that's kind of encompasses everything else that's not in the capital. So that's how we're going to keep it going here. So capital budget, any questions from members of the council on the capital budget? Councilman Lattiser.
Thank you, Mr. President. Peter, I know there's been discussions back and forth on the ARPA spending, and what my concern is to be sure that the monies we're spending out of the ARPA portion is for one-time items, meaning that we're not doing something today with that money that is going to require further expenses and taxpayer dollars and maintenance and repairs, et cetera, in perpetuity. Because doing something today with opera money that is going to put a heavy financial burden on us in the future is a concern. So I would like to hear your position on that with regards to monies we're spending on these things. Well, we just look at building renovation for the police department. That's crystal clear. You're going to spend $500,000 this year and $5.5 million next year. It's not something that we're going to keep doing. Obviously, you have ongoing repairs, but my concern is that these are one-shot deals, not something that's going to keep coming back to the well year after year after year. Eventually, all these items are going to put a significant, if that occurs, will put a significant financial burden on the taxpayers when you start lining it up with contractual requirements, healthcare increases, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So could you speak to that for us, please?
Well, referring to either Roman numeral X of the budget, which is a summary, or referring to pages 2 and 3 of the capital budget, you will see $17.63 million pledged from ARPA for one-time capital projects. No question about that. But we talked earlier about the operating budget also has a $10.8 million pledge from ARPA. And some of that we believe is not reoccurring. We believe that the spike in energy costs will moderate going forward. We're pledging some of that to pay pandemic medical insurance claims, and Blue Cross has been able to provide us in really good information on claims that we've had to pay because of the pandemic, health insurance claims related to COVID-19. I talked about, we have not had a full recovery from the pandemic on the revenue front, and I talked yesterday about especially the airport revenues. So of the $10.8 million that's pledged from ARPA for the operating budget, about $4 million of that is not reoccurring. But there is, there's no question about it, there is part of this, about between $6 and $7 million of the ARPA pledge that's here. Of the $39 million is for expenses that are reoccurring, and we're going to have to deal with that as we construct the next budget, as we manage this budget. We've tried to isolate those two things. I think the mayor's message has done a good job of that, and he talks about exactly what you're talking about. As much as possible, we want to use ARPA for non-recurring costs or for costs associated with COVID-19, whether it be health insurance claims and the energy cost increases we've had that we hope will not be reoccurring. So that's the bottom line, is that absolutely 75%, and don't forget, and we don't really see this here, we pledged the $7 million for Bayside. We've spent a lot of money out of that account. We had pledged $3 million for the water main project at Route 37. We're not going to have to use ARPA because we got another earmark from our congressional delegation. So really, the big material items are the $7 million that we pledged last year for Bayside, the things that you see listed here, plus $10.8 million for the general fund, of which about $4 of it we don't think is reoccurring.
And we know that you mentioned the $7 million for Bayside, so that's a one-time deal.
Exactly.
That's not going to have any, reoccurring cost to us. But some of these things, as you pointed out, will, as other things have, which brings me to the question, and I'll preface that question by stating it's probably about 2 months ago now that the City Council passed a resolution requesting from you a 5-year forecast, projecting out these numbers. And in the past, between last night and tonight, I started to count and lost track of how many times trend forecasts, projections were discussed, not just by us, but by the school department. Budgets are a forecast, they're projections. And that's what we asked for. And I was the primary sponsor of that. I asked for a 5-year financial forecast, at least a 5-year. So these things can be analyzed. These trends, these assumptions, these projections can be analyzed. I have great concerns with taking action on items long-term when we don't have any type of projections whatsoever to be able to report back to the people we represent as to where we think we're going to be in 3 or 4 or 5 years. Are you prepared to provide us with that forecast that we requested about 2 months ago?
I've done some work on it. I'm not there yet. One of the things that's changed, and I was talking to Tim last night about it, is interest rate assumptions on a new bond issue for $350 million have changed. And I think I mentioned earlier, we issued the last of the $40 million in February, competitive sale, 2.4%. My financial advisor is telling me if we did that right now, it would be close to 4%. That's a big change. because the municipal bond market is been even worse than treasuries. So, and Tim is working with our financial advisor, and he's working with them on that part of it, you know. The other assumptions are a challenge, and we're working on it.
And, you know, the challenge also is, in addition to the things we're discussing now, next week, we're going to be discussing the potential for another $350 million plus bond. When people call me and say, what is this going to cost us? My answer is, I don't know. I have no clue.
I gave you a communication back in February, and I thought the numbers were pretty scary back then. So, and
those
Yeah,
were not
we'll talk
inclusive.
we'll talk about that particular project at another time.
So, well, I got my answer as far as the forecast, and that's going to have a lot to do with helping or not helping me make my decisions as we move forward. The school technology and capital, that's going to be that 1.2 million. That's in addition to the, I believe, 4 million or so that's being moved over to the school department or provided to the school department?
that's part of, and I was a little bothered last night. The school department just talked about the city's contribution, but 1.2 million of that city's contribution is this ARPA money. This is not in addition to that. It's part of that, part of the local contribution for supporting the Warwick Public Schools fiscal year 23 budget.
So I don't understand. So are we doing a 4-something million?
It's
Plus the
4.9.
1.2?
Of the 4.9, 1.2 million is
Got it.
this.
So it's 3.7?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that certainly wasn't made clear last night. But then again, I guess when you have 7 or 8 people coming to the table, like the council president pointed out, those are, you know, the concerns that I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Travis.
Because in the capital budget for the library, it talks about Norwood branch and Apponaug branch, and that's about the handicap compliance. But we haven't talked about the library yet, and I wanted to know about if there was an ongoing project yet, because I don't see it in the capital budget. And I believe they were working on it, but I don't know if it stopped. And that's about the door that goes in that room that I've been talking about for the last 15 years, 20 years. But
And we do have the library coming there. We had to,
so
remember,
I'll talk about that then.
Okay.
Okay.
We had to move them down yesterday. Councilman Gephardt.
Thank you. Finance Director, so you touched on the 7 point something million in revenue replacement and support to the operational budget recently. And we had similar conversations last year as the budget included a 5.8 or so million dollar allocation from the rainy day fund. And when I look on page 1, table 1, the FY22 revised budget includes 5.876 million in fund drawdown, and the FY22 projected shows 0.
Yes, but it's still showing a reliance on ARPA. of
Some
like
revenue
4.4
replacement.
4.4 million.
Sure.
Yes. So
But
things have improved since we passed the budget.
yeah, so between when you put your budget together and anticipated the potential for drawing down the rainy day fund by 5.876 million.
Yeah.
And then the year unfolded and it looks like the drawdown's going to be zero. I mean, did you draw down from some other account or did the scenario?
Just the revenues and expense projections from the time you passed the budget a year ago till now improved. And I think I even gave you a report in January that showed us we were moving in that direction. This ARPA, the ARPA money, because of its flexibility, you can use it for anything except debt service, payment of claims, increase of fund balance. There's one other thing, but if it's revenue loss qualified, and there's a documentation here, it's really the same as using fund balance. And we could have mixed up the resources. We could have used some of fund balance and some ARPA to balance this budget. It was a simpler presentation just to do one. As I said, I'm hoping that the end bottom line will be better in the current year. We won't have to use the 4.4 million that's pledged. We'll be back for a final bite at the apple next year. But we had considerable improvements, mostly in spending, but some in revenue, especially in the real estate sector, good collection rate on property taxes, so that our situation improved, so that we didn't have to draw. The financial statements show we're not going to have to rely on fund balance in the current year to balance the budget.
Yeah, so, you know, as Councilman Lattiser brought up, and as we've talked about just about every category as we've gone through and looked at, you know, what are the historical trends of how things are performed, and then we make our assumptions for the following year based off of that history. You know, for us on the council who have to look at what one could perceive as somewhat of a structural deficit that we're pushing forward, it's helpful, I think, to look at the historical trends, right? So you and your team put together a budget last year.
And we did a lot better than we thought we were going to do. And I'm hoping the same thing happens again.
Well, I mean, we're hopeful too, but I think it speaks to how you and your team approach a budget from a conservative expectation perspective. And has anything changed in your philosophy about putting together budgets from last year to this year?
Well, I mean, there's clearly a focus that the mayor gave me when I was working with him on exactly what Councilman Lattiser was talking about. One, let's spend as much of this money as we can on one-time projects and spend it on money so that we don't have to spend money next year. So the thing that I think has really happened, and the lion's share of our savings have been in personnel costs. There's you kept picking up on differences between projected and 23. Most of our department directors are determined to fill all their positions, but it doesn't happen. Recruitment is difficult out there. Police department especially, they've had a hard time recruiting people. But in public works, you're seeing a pretty sizable surplus because of vacancies department. On the other hand, energy costs are way up, so that's been a negative since the budget you passed last year. But in general, revenues have been good, and there's been savings in personnel services, and the personnel services savings could happen again.
So when you finished this document and then sent it off to us and then went home and had dinner or whatever and then went to bed, what was the thing that you thought about when you were in bed that kept you up?
Boy. Well, I mean, the main thing that keeps you up, and Lynn knows this, and our other staff members, there's a lot of numbers here. You can make mistakes. So what keeps me up at night is worrying I've made a mistake somewhere along the line. And so far, other than some position count things, we had a bad one last year in city council. We budgeted an extra $150,000 from an error. But so far, that's what keeps me awake more than anything. I have a cheat sheet where every day afterward, I make sure that the changes we make when we meet with the mayor flow into the financial statements. That's what I worry about at night when I can't get to sleep. Where are the mistakes? That's what Lynn worries about too. She says no.
I worry that people didn't get paid on Friday. But this is very conservative. I will say that much.
All right, I appreciate that. But I mean, part of our job is to look you all in the eyes and your department directors in the eyes and say, did you go in with eyes wide open and think about all the different factors, millions of factors that are going to happen over the course of the next year? And is this a budget that we can achieve? And so far, I feel pretty comfortable with what y'all have talked about. So I appreciate that, and thank you.
I'm comfortable that we can achieve this budget. The challenges of this structural deficit are not insurmountable, but that they're going to be a challenge for us. So we need to have good performance during the year. We need to hope that the General Assembly, who seems not to know what to do with all the money they've got, can be more generous without restricting the use of funds with their resources. We talked about school state aid increase was negligible this year. I was disappointed in that, as were many of my colleagues in the other communities.
So, thank you. Any questions? Councilman Ricks.
I do have some concerns about the ARPA funds. I see on page Roman numeral 4 of the mayor's budget proposal that statements, and I do appreciate the transparency on that the city of Warwick qualifies for revenue loss use of ARPA funds. Goes on from there, discussing revenue loss qualifications of $35.4 million and how this gives us a lot of flexibility in how we spend these funds. I suppose first question, kind of a threshold question, I just want to make sure to ask it for the record. What is the process in making sure that these different funds, or excuse me, these different line items are complying with the U.S. Treasury's final rule?
Well, Lynn is our filer, but really, the final rule was surprising to me because if you have revenue growth of less than 5.2%, you're eligible to fully qualify for our $39.4 million entitlement with very limited restrictions, which I talked about earlier. You can't use it for debt service. You can't increase your fund balance. You can't use it to pay claims. There's a fourth thing. Those are the main criteria, and it's clear that our revenue base. And by the way, in some places, a municipality in another state that has a personal income tax or sales tax, they might be challenged to qualify. But when you're relying 75% of your revenue on the property tax does not grow 5.2%. So if it grows, we had a good year this year with no changes in values because we didn't do the reval. We're up, property tax levy up 0.78% just on real estate. So you're going to qualify for all this revenue loss money, which has really very few restrictions. So.
Thank you. I appreciate the explanation there. I do have some concerns, and I don't mean to, when I use an analogy, I don't mean to make it too literal. Something on my mind is that we do have to be concerned about long-term structural deficit where various items that we would normally be paying out of the regular operating budget, we're using ARPA funds for, and then when the ARPA funds run out, where do we turn to make sure that we're fulfilling all of that? Well, we look back to the operating budget and we see that the money might not be there to cover everything that we have been using for the ARPA funds. So I'm not saying that it's a bad use of the ARPA funds, not at all. I think that so many of these items, it's very important that we spend the money on those areas. But I also don't want to see us in a position in the long term where we've been using this one-time money, and then when it comes time to get off of the ARPA funds because they're out, don't want us to be in a position where we realize that we're not in great shape to be picking up from where we left off. So the analogy is, we've all seen the celebrities, the athletes, where they get the one-time windfall. They're doing great for a few years there, but then instead of using that money, investing in the long term, once that money runs out, well, they end up in trouble. It's something that we've all seen on TV, and I'm sure that there are going to be a lot of cities and towns that when this one-time money runs out, they're not going to be in great shape. I don't want Warwick to be on that list. So a few items that relate to that I'll just point out now would be, for example, we're spending $3 million of ARPA funds fiscal year 23 on additional paving. I absolutely agree that $3 million ARPA funds, additional paving, much needed. That's a great use of the funds. But our operating budget paving account, rather the asphalt line item, is $200,000. It's my understanding that the city has about 400 miles of roads and very much a ballpark. I know that we, in order to get a more precise estimate, would have to go out for bid, especially with the price increases. But fair to say, ballpark, maybe in the area of $1 million to pave a mile of roads, more or less. 400 miles of roads, $1 million per mile. Even if we were spending, say, $4 million on roads a year, before we look at the matches and such, because the matches are very important with the utilities and the like. But even if that $4 million were matched, make it $8 million, all hypothetical numbers here, that would put us at a ballpark of paving the roads once every 50 years, which is not how long the roads are going to last. So speaking of structural debts, making sure that we're keeping up with where we need to be for success in the long term, I feel like we should have that money, that revenue stream that's dedicated to the roads, because roads, it's not an issue with this administration in particular, absolutely not. I think that the city of Warwick has been underfunding its roads for a couple of decades, and we are seeing the long-term results of that. And if we're not putting in significant amounts more into the roads, as well as other infrastructure, water, sewer, then the problems we've been experiencing for years are going to continue to get worse, not better. I see ARPA funds as a great stopgap. I certainly agree that $3 million in ARPA funds into the roads, that is an excellent investment. I'd like it to be more than $3 million. But I also have concerns about where the funding is in the operating budget because if we just say that, okay, well, when the ARPA funds run out, we'll put 3 million from the roads, from the operating budget into the roads. Well, that's certainly doable, but then we look at various other areas where we're also spending ARPA funds on vehicles. So little over $500,000 a year, fiscal years 23.
2 minutes, Councilman.
I'll hurry this along. A quick note, similar to Councilwoman Travis, I'd like to discuss the library capital improvements when the library comes up to speak. Let's see. So briefly, I do see a lot of areas where we are looking at one-time expenditures, such as the renovation to the police station. But I do have concerns about the use of ARPA funds in ways that in future years, we're going to have to be picking up that money out of the operating budget. And I don't want us to be falling off a fiscal cliff and then just in order to maintain our current efforts end up looking at a maximum tax increase in a particular year, or at the same time, even worse, a maximum tax increase, and then realizing, oh, we still won't have money to repave the roads and replace vehicles that need to be replaced. So I do have concerns about a 0% tax increase, in that I'm afraid that it's going to set us up for a situation where when the ARPA funds run out, we're going to have to make very difficult choices between replacing vehicles and the like, repaving the roads, various expenses that the city, its residents expect to maintain our quality of services. Thank you.
Councilman Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to kind of do an opposing, not an opposing, I apologize, a follow-up to what the councilman said, but my opinion, and I want to go on record as the councilman just did, is that the mayor and this administration has made it very clear that we're using the ARPA funds for infrastructure. And I think the councilman made a great point. For decades, our infrastructure was ignored. We're not paving 400 miles of road in this budget. We've gradually started paving roads about 5 years ago. We remember we also have a bond that we used to help get the roads paved. And the mayor, to the credit of the mayor and the administration and this council, and to even the people that speak, it's follow-up and it's putting a plan in place, a 20, a 30, a 40-year plan. So understanding and hearing my colleagues' discussion, I also want to follow up and say I have heard, and I want to assure the people that are listening to this, I have heard the administration as well as this council say, let's put together a plan moving forward. But I can't agree with the councilman more when he said for decades the infrastructure was ignored. But I'm really happy to see that this ARPA funds going into the infrastructure that is so desperately needed. So I just wanted to follow up with that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Can I comment on the paving? Can I comment on the paving? Okay. We have 400 miles of roads, but before I was mayor, Mayor Solomon and the council started on the roads. We've done a significant amount over the last 3 years. We're going forward with sewer authorities, paving a lot of our roads on their dime. National Grid has done an enormous amount of roads, so our paving's in good shape. We're coming along. We could budget more, but we couldn't possibly do that much in the season. And we will be coming back to we did have to go out to bid. Christy and Eric will be coming to you next month because the price of asphalt has skyrocketed. So they wouldn't hold to the prices they had last year. So they'll be up in June, so I hope you're all in a good mood.
Any additional questions from members of the council on the capital budget? Any additional questions from members of the public on the capital budget? Any questions from members of the public on the capital budget? Next up is the sewer budget. Good evening and welcome to the Sewer Department to the City Council meeting. We are in, if you're following along with the capital budget book, page 7 is the Sewer Department. Do we have any questions from members of the council for the Sewer Department? Councilman Sinapi.
Do you know when the last time we reached an agreement on the West Warwick, I don't know, I think it was like the West Warwick Compact or something, where,
Intermunicipal agreement?
yeah, do you know when what year we last entered that into for West Warwick?
Don't believe there have been any significant updates for some time, but the first intermunicipal agreement has been in place for probably over a decade. Yeah, maybe, yeah, several decades.
Because the only
Since
reason
sewers were installed, and we found that it was best to go to West Warwick due to some of the geology, ledge, other things that we've encountered, especially up on Bald Hill Road in those areas.
Yeah, the only reason I bring it up, and it's not really something we need to talk about tonight, is I remember at a sewer authority meeting a couple of years ago, we went over the agreement with West Warwick, and it was incredibly one-sided, and we were basically getting gouged. So if one day we can actually chip away at that, that would be ideal. But again, not something for tonight, so just wanted to bring it up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lattiser.
Thank you, President. First, I want to start off by saying, Director Rogers, you and your staff have been exceptional.
Thank you
As
so much.
you all know, we have a significant project going on in my ward right now, the Bayside Project. It's a project that's been hanging out there for 30 years. No one wanted to touch it. It was a political firestorm. You never got elected by promising sewers, all of this crazy nonsense. And we've got 900 and some families down there that were still living on failed cesspools and septic systems that were failing or have failed. It's a football that had been kicked around forever. And finally, after 9 years of my involvement in this, that project is well underway. And your staff, as well as yourself, have been excellent in communication. You've kept me updated. You've kept me informed weekly as to what's going on. Weekly, I'm on site speaking with the staff workers from D'Ambra that's out there. Those folks couldn't be more pleasant to work with. They're professional, they're courteous, they're helpful, they're very kind to my constituents. I'm happy also to say my constituents have been very, very good to them. They bring them pizza, they bring them soda, they bring them water, etc. So it's a great team effort, and the communication is key. When you're doing a project as significant as that, that's impacting the lives of so many people who have to take their kids to work, they have to get to work. You have all walks of life down there that need to go somewheres, elderly folks that just can't get out on their own. And with all that said, I can honestly say that I personally have not received one complaint from my constituents over there. And it's really exciting to see the Highland Beach area. We're pretty well done in that area and now be moving down to Palmer and Tidewater. And those people that have waited, some of them 20, 30 years, will finally start seeing their sewers that were promised to them, God only knows back to when, to be done. So I want to thank you for that. I want to thank your staff. I want to thank the board, the administration, who, without Mayor Picozzi's support in this, we probably would still be sitting here kicking that can down the road. So thank you very much, and I am really looking forward to bringing this project to completion. We will be done by the end of 2022, right? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Thank you.
23. Thank you
Thank
so much.
Thank you, Councilman. Questions for the Sewer Department? Any questions from the Sewer Department? Any questions from members of the public on the Sewer Department? Yep. Oh, Councilwoman Travis.
You didn't see my hand. The grinder pumps, it says number 8296. I see we went way up on that, so we're getting more, a lot more.
We are putting in purchases for grinder pumps throughout fiscal '23. In fiscal '22, we've seen some issues with supplies, the supply and demand issue with getting those grinder pumps. And we anticipate that Bayside, because it is a low-pressure system, we want to make sure when people want to connect, they're ready to connect, the grinder pump is going to be available.
That's
So we've
good.
made a concerted effort to order extra this year.
That's definitely a good idea. Engineering services, 8392. What's that? I know it went up to 185.
Yes, that has gone up, and if you would look at our capital plan, you will see that over the next 3 years, we have many projects that we want to start. In order to get SRF funding, in order to qualify for potentially extra ARPA money, if it becomes available, or earmark money, we need projects that are ready to go. And we want to be proactive. We want to have engineering services increased so that the engineers are able to get those projects to design, and we can anticipate possibly the money won't be available through a grant or, earmark or ARPA. So we need to be prepared to go to for state revolving fund money through Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank, and the only way we're going to do that is if we have an approved project through DEM. So we're just being very proactive.
Good job,
Councilwoman.
being ahead of the game, yep. The
Thank you.
last one I have is 8370, emergency construction. Is that when something goes wrong and then you're ready to take care of it?
Which number was that? 370?
370, emergency construction.
Those are our emergency construction services. So, and manhole rehabilitation. Thank you, Julie. Julie's our account auditor.
Yes, I know.
So manhole rehabilitation, as you know, if you've driven around the city of Warwick, there are some manholes that have started to settle.
Oh, yeah.
And they're just because of the age of the equipment and the manhole structure, it may have been debilitated in some way where the frame is starting to crack, or a manhole cover now is not sitting properly because of excessive wear, because of traffic. And we're doing our best to make sure that those are addressed as well. That will also cut down on claims for the city.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I just have one, maybe an easy one. In looking at the personnel supplement, operator 1. I'm trying to reconcile between the last year budget personnel supplement, this year personnel supplement, and then a document that Lynn provided today, and based on the dates of hire and the 2.75 for last year and the 2.75 for this year, the net amount for 23 just looks higher than I would expect.
So we have 3 operators.
Yep.
And I'm anticipating that there was some issue with longevity, where we see an increase with longevity. We have one individual, one of our operators is seeing a longevity increase. And there may have been, was there a step increase with any of them over the course? Okay. Okay, so one of our operators just went to step 3, or is going to be receiving their step 3, and the other operator is going to be seeing an increase in their longevity.
Okay. I'm going to send you the snippet that I'm looking at. Maybe we can just follow up on that to make sure that I'm clear. But other than that, I'm all set.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Be happy to.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions for members of the council on the sewer department? Any questions for members of the public on the sewer department? Any questions for members of the public on the sewer department? All right, thank you very much, Director. Thank you very much, guys. Have a great evening.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Next up is the Water Department. That is on page 11 in your capital budget. Good evening, Director. You're not last, but you're pretty close, so we appreciate all your time here. Are there any questions from members of the council on the Water Department's budget? Councilman Lattiser.
Thank you, Mr. President. Hi, Director. Terry, it looks like there's no, I'm sorry, that's not yours. On the items, let me just get last year's as well. Bear with me 1 minute. All right, just save me some time, Terry. So on your heavy equipment operator 2, your meter service person, have both of those line items, are they actually lower than they were last year? Or did I just read this backwards?
I'm sorry, did you say heavy equipment operator 2?
Yes, heavy equipment operator 2.
No, we have had one employee been there 34 years, and we had one employee within the department take another job. So that's why you see discrepancy for a lower pay.
So it's not lower?
No.
Okay.
No, so when you take a new job, you start off at step 1. And it is low, but, you know,
it's what, please?
It's the same pay grade, but it's low because he's on step 1.
Here it is. Hold on 1 minute. Now you got me wanting to look closer. Okay, 41. Okay, got it. Okay, no, that's correct. Terry, I think you were here last night when I was, actually it was today when I was speaking to Director Earls. I want to share the same comments. You have been very, very good with communication when we have, water line breakages, or we have, a block shut off, or testing fire hydrants or whatever. And that has been very helpful to be able to communicate those type of issues to my constituents. And I just want to let you know too, when I went into your building a couple weeks ago to pick up those little tablets, I did put that out on my Facebook page.
I seen that, yes.
And it was really appreciated by those folks out there, because they didn't realize and they didn't know how much water you can lose.
You'd be surprised, yes.
Sewer Authority loves that. Of course, you guys love that too, but the people we represent don't love it so much. So that was very helpful. And not only do my people thank you, I thank you.
Good, we're happy to help.
Any questions from members of the council on the Water Department budget? Any questions from members of the council on the Water Department budget? Any questions from members of the public on the Water Department budget? Any questions from members of the public on the Water Department budget? All right, thank you. Next up is ARPA. So we discussed a lot of this in the capital budget, but I want to just, are there any questions on the ARPA that were not already asked or discussed in the capital budget? I believe, Director, you wanted to, Director Schaefer, you wanted to say something first? You got to say it on the mic.
sorry. I hope everyone in the council will review the budget and tax resolution. There's a new section added to deal with ARPA. Mike Ursillo helped me draft it. Solicitor Walsh has reviewed it, but it's a new language to deal with ARPA appropriations that continue beyond 1 year. So that's the real. There's also language on the car tax rate in case the General Assembly eliminates it or makes some change so that we're compliant with state law and whatever we do on the car tax. But the main thing is look at the language on ARPA in the last section of the resolution.
Thank you. And that's a resolution that we will be discussing on Thursday. Yes. Any questions that were not asked on ARPA? And Councilman, questions on ARPA?
Yes, thank you. So a brief question as to the $1.8 million, which refers to, I believe, the $200,000 per ward for ward projects. If we could get a little information on what the process should be for that. Thank you.
I have some information for you, Councilman. So I'm working with the administration on that. We are going to have a process that everyone will follow. It'll be the same thing. We're going to sample it at what the General Assembly did. There's going to be a form that any member of the public can fill out. I live in Ward 7. I request X amount for this project, explain it, and put it up there. And the website will capture all that. Council members will be able to see that. Members of the public will be able to see it. We are also hoping that people will reach out. I know you guys have already been having meetings, talking to people, and get that. And then it'll be like every other process that goes before the city council to spend money. If you need to hire someone, we have to do RFP, bidding process, go through. There'll be public comments, public meetings, and a vote. So we're still in the early stages of the process part. We're going to model it after the state, and more details to follow. But that's kind of the framework. We're looking at that now. Obviously, we'll work with the administration, legal department, get everybody included. But there will be plenty of public input, plenty of opportunities for people to weigh in on individual ward projects and alike.
Thank you. I want to say that this is a very exciting initiative. I'm 100% behind it. I see this as something where it's a great equalizer, very decentralized, where we can make sure that every corner of the city is seeing directly some of the benefits here, and it's going to be guided by the citizens really at that grassroots neighborhood level. Thank you.
And the process that the council president is proposing will be a very fair and transparent process. I urge the council to get moving on the process fairly quickly because there's an expiration date for the money. We have to have it designated by 2024, December?
December 31st, 2024.
Right. And I don't expect all the work to get done because you're going to overwhelm the planning department going out to bid and all that. But, you know, we'll get it done. We just have to have the intent of the money.
Yes, and the time really does fly by, especially on projects that, well, any kind of construction or the like, it doesn't happen overnight. We all know how it works and how long it takes with the bidding process and such. So I know we're all excited to get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Anybody else have any other questions on the ARPA funding? Any members of the public have any final questions on the ARPA funding? Okay, next up is the library. Yeah.
We have.
Good evening, Director. Welcome back to the council meeting. Hi, James. I don't think that's on. If you press and hold it.
Yes,
There it
okay.
is.
Jana Stevenson, Director of Warwick Public Library.
Thank you very much. I believe Councilwoman Travis has a question for you.
Now, in the capital budget, we talked about the very much needed handicap stuff for both those libraries. But I didn't see anything in the budget for the door is that going to be done this year?
Yes, well, fingers crossed. It was in the capital budget for FY22. And for financial reasons, we ended up paying for it through our general budget or agreeing to. The problem right now we're having is the door. It's on back order until October. So all of the architecture, the drawings, the person has been contracted. We have the builder, everything is in place, but we're waiting on a door. So as soon as that comes in, we'll definitely be installing
Very
it.
excited that, out of all the years I've been talking about, that you're supportive, the board was supportive. So I wanted to thank you for that.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
I think it's very much needed. You see every day, all the shootings we're having, and I'm just afraid that we might have 5 or 6 girls in that room or
Right.
people in that room, and they got no way out
Mhm.
at all.
And it's a public library. Everybody goes in.
Yes, yes. And I know that your pop-up library is doing well, I heard.
Yes, so our pop-up library is all over the place. And we had an ARPA grant. We got that through the Office of Library and Information Services to pay for a van. So now we have a van, a mobile library that's going to go all over the city in the summer. And we're partnering with that with West Bay Collaborative. And the idea is that we visit a specific community a couple of times, figure out what their needs are, go back to West Bay Collaborative and say, they're concerned about applications for rent relief. And then we'll gather someone from West Bay Collaborative to come along with us and help them with that application process. At the same time, we'll be providing summer reading activities, story times, and other kinds of enriching things for the community.
Thank you. I'm all set.
Thank you for presenting. I want to follow up on Councilwoman Travis, her comments. So I know that myself and the council president wrote letters of support for the access improvements at the Norwood and Apponaug library branches. I see those being budgeted for fiscal year 24. So I'd be curious on an update on that as well as on the timeline.
Sure. The application for, I believe it's an earmark for congressional funding to Langevin. That was submitted, and so at this point, I believe we wait, and I'm not positive how long that takes, but it sounds like 6 months or so. I think that they didn't put it in the capital budget because we're hopeful to get those funds to pay for it, and then, we can have the improvements done that way. In addition to the capital fund or the funding to pay for the actual construction, along with that, my original plan was to also apply for a grant through maybe the Champlin Foundation to redo the inside as well. So it'd be like basically a full new library.
That's very exciting. And I also appreciate the copy of the pamphlet you handed out to us all. I know that a lot of my constituents have been asking about the local Norwood Library. I'm sure that the same is true for my colleagues in their respective wards. I think that this is one of those great neighborhood treasures for so many of us across the whole city. Let's see. If I recall correctly, and Let's see, I think it was as of a couple of years ago, the branches did have more expanded hours than they do now. I know that this conversation came up on social media a little while ago when a constituent brought up the topic and started tagging some folks. So I suppose that this is the opportunity. What would different levels of the wish list look like in terms of getting the neighborhood branches back up to the hours that we had before the pandemic?
My request in the personnel budget, the only increase that I asked for was 2 positions to be added back into our personnel budget. They were removed last year. For the past maybe 3 years, we've had significant staffing issues where we had multiple vacancies. And at the time last year, these 2 positions were vacant and they were removed from the budget. I'm asking to have them placed back in the budget so that we can go back to, I believe it's 20 to 22 hours a week at each branch is what we were at in 2019 before we had to close. So the goal is to get back at least to that. I feel like at some point, once the remodeling project has been done, the updates have been done, they would probably warrant more hours and may need an additional staff person working there. But at this point, if we could just get back to having those 2 positions. I know at one point, it was mentioned that if in the summer we could bump it up a little more, but that's actually where we see the greatest need for staff because everybody wants to be on vacation in the summer. So we're actually much more short-staffed at the time of year where we're much more busy. It's our busiest time of year. So it's hard to juggle. Having those 2 extra full-time staff members makes all the difference.
Thank you. And would you be able to send us an email with the precise numbers for that proposal before the vote on Thursday?
For what numbers?
How much it would cost to fund those 2 full-time positions for our consideration as a council if we were able to, and obviously I'm only one person with one vote, but I would hope that when my colleagues and I examine the budget, we can explore whether we can find monies available to add those positions. I understand that there are a lot of competing priorities across the budget, but I personally would like to see if it's possible for that to be made a priority if we can find the available funds. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. And they do have their,
The
they have their
2
own form.
positions have been added in. We went from, I think it was 12 full-time, no, I'm sorry, that's part-time. We went from 5 full-time library aides to 7. It's been added in, but the funding hasn't been placed in, and I believe that's because it takes time to, I'm not sure how budgeting works. I thought it was odd, but it takes time to hire, and so you don't budget for it if you don't have it yet. I'm not positive. I know it's around $33,000 a piece just for their salary, and I don't know how benefits work with that because we don't usually have that info.
The positions were added. It seems the funding, it was an error there. The positions are going to be there.
Yeah.
Oh, that's excellent. And just to make sure that I'm clear, that everything is clear on the record for the folks at home, that would be relating to being able to expand the hours of the 3 different community library branches, Apponaug, Connecticut, and Norwood, for the coming fiscal year so that we can get back to the hours that we had more or less as of a couple of years ago?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Oh, that's very good.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is just something where as we make sure to get that precise clarification, please do feel free to follow up with us, phone, or especially email with any particular numbers to make sure that everything is squared away as expected before the council votes on Thursday. And then I would just want to add briefly that this is something that's near and dear to my heart as someone who has lived in the Norwood neighborhood for about 30 years now. So I was one of those kids who was attending story time and craft time at the Norwood branch.
Nice, very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other questions for the library, for members of the council? Questions for the library? Any questions for members of the public on the library? Any questions for members of the public on the library? Great, thank you very much, Director. I am looking for a motion to close the public hearing. Councilman Foley.
I move to close the public hearing.
Second by Councilman Howe. And Councilwoman Travis, Councilman Lattiser. The clerk will call the roll. Favorable action is to close the public hearing.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser? Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis? 9 yes to close.
Thank you. I'm now looking for a motion to continue to May 26, 2022 at 4 p.m.
Motion to continue to May 26th at 2022, 4 p.m.
Thank you, Councilman Howe. Second by Councilman Foley, Councilwoman Travis, Councilman Gephardt. The clerk will call the roll for the motion to continue to May 26 at 4 o'clock.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser? Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis? 9 yes to continue to May 26th at 4 o'clock.
Thank you very much. We'll see everybody on May 26 at 4 o'clock. Oh. We'd like to invite everyone downstairs. We have dinner. Councilman Howe is here.